capsizing. Join us live.
Also ahead, forced from their home of 40 years. We hear from those left devastated by the UK's concrete crisis.
I wake up in the morning crying. I wake up during the night thinking about it. It's just on your mind all the time.
Calls to the government to abandon its plans to scrap the winter fuel payments with claims that it'll hurt the most vulnerable.
And in sport, England are in control and will hope to wrap up victory on day 4 of the first test against Sri Lanka in Manchester.
Hello, very good morning. Thanks for joining us here on Breakfast this morning. Our top story, former BBC presenter Jermaine Jenas has apologised for sending inappropriate messages to women at the corporation. The ex-footballer was sacked by the broadcaster following complaints about workplace conduct. He told the Sun newspaper that while nothing physical happened, he'd let his family, friends and colleagues down. Alice Porter has the story.
I am 100% in the wrong and I accept full responsibility for that. And it's something that obviously I need to address and look at myself.
It was an emotional confession as the former BBC presenter apologised for sending sexual messages to colleagues.
Firstly, to say sorry to my wife, to my family, to the women involved as well, and what I've put them through.
The married father of 4 admitted to cheating, but said it was not physical.
There is nothing illegal that has happened here. This is consenting adults that messaged each other.
This interview comes after the BBC announced on Thursday they were sacking Jermaine Jenas, following allegations that he sent inappropriate messages to a female colleague. It was a rapid fall from grace. Jermaine Jenas had been a regular face of the BBC's biggest programmes, The One Show and Match of the Day. The former England footballer had been seen as a natural successor to replace Gary Lineker as host of Match of the Day. Jermaine Jenas also presented on Talk Sport and was on air when the BBC's sacking was announced.
I can't really talk about it. As you can probably see, I am not happy about it. But currently, as it stands, I'm going to have to let the lawyers deal with it. You know, there's 2 sides to every story.
But in this interview with The Sun, Jermaine Jenas appeared a more contrite figure, as his professional future hangs in the balance. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Well, Molly Malone's here with me now. Hi there, Molly. And it feels like this story has moved at quite a pace.
Yeah, it really does. It was on Thursday that it was announced that he was to be sacked as a presenter. He was actually on TalkSport Radio at the time, on the radio show. And it was there that he said, let's leave it to the lawyers. I don't really want to talk about it. 24 hours on, last night we had that interview where he seemed to want to convey kind of 2 messages. One, that he was deeply sorry to the women involved, for his colleagues, for sending inappropriate messages. Also that he was sorry to his wife and for his family, in his words, for cheating. But he was also fairly defiant. He said he wanted to kind of put paid to swirling rumours and said, look, they were consenting adults. I didn't do anything illegal. But there does also seem to have been this kind of some speed over the way it's been handled. The BBC say that the issue only came to their attention a few weeks ago and he was then sacked. And Jenas said in his interview with The Sun that he was actually sacked on a video call on Monday while on holiday with his family, and that came just 5 days after the initial HR consultation process. And BBC bosses will want to paint a picture and to be seen to be responding to this quickly. They'll be all too aware of recent scandals that we've seen in recent months. Strictly Come Dancing, one of their most high-profile programmes in the spotlight over allegations of bad behaviour, and also one of their most high-profile presenters, Hugh Edwards, going through the courts at the moment. So they want to be seen to be having a kind of swift response to this, and it seems certainly at surface level that that's what they've done here.
OK, Molly, thanks very much indeed. A manhunt is currently underway in Germany after 3 people were killed and at least 4 others seriously injured in a knife attack at a cultural festival. Police say the suspect appeared to have acted alone and at random, but fled the scene shortly afterwards and remains on the run. Our Euro correspondent Siobhan Robbins has the latest from Zolungen.
It was supposed to be a festival celebrating diversity, but it ended in bloodshed. Just after 9:30 on Friday night, a man with a knife entered the town's central square and began his attack, killing and injuring multiple people before fleeing. Police quickly moved to close down streets as the scale of what happened became clear. The festival was evacuated, event organisers telling people to go home and take cover. The attack happened here in Solingen, a city of 160,000 people, located 25 kilometres east of Düsseldorf. The festival, held to mark its 650th anniversary, ended up being a dark day in its history. We all wanted to celebrate our city anniversary together, and now we have to mourn deaths and injuries, said the mayor in a statement on Facebook. It breaks my heart that there was an attack in our city. I have tears in my eyes when I think of those we lost. Police say the reason for the attack, which caused this pain, is still unclear.
The first witnesses told us the person attacked people with a knife. We have no information about a motivation.
As the people of Solingen grieve, police are urging them to remain calm but vigilant. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Solingen.
Well, let's just show you the scene live now in Solingen this morning, the scene of that attack at the festival. As we were hearing there from Siobhan Robbins, that has left 3 people dead and at least 5 seriously injured, according to the police. As you can see, a heavy police presence there at the moment. And we will be reporting live from there in the next few hours. We'll be hearing from Siobhan Robbins from the scene later in the programme. Now, prosecutors in Italy are this morning expected to reveal the evidence they've gathered in their investigation into the sinking of a yacht off the coast of Sicily. Italian media is reporting this could include possible manslaughter charges, which Sky News understands to be a standard procedure in such complex cases. Well, Ashna Hurinag is in Porticello for us this morning. Ashna, morning to you. So tell us a little bit about what we might hear at this news conference a little bit later.
Well, first of all, Anna, it was just after lunchtime yesterday where the body of that final missing person was pulled out of the shipwreck and brought ashore, bringing that recovery operation to an end. And as you say, attention now turns and focus now turns to how exactly this happened. The key questions surrounding this will be how did a yacht this size, 56 metres in length, sink so quickly and capsize? As you've been hearing, the Sicilian local prosecutor, we know, has been gathering evidence, speaking to witnesses, speaking to those 15 survivors who are on board, gathering evidence, we understand, that may potentially feed into some sort of criminal investigation. But, as I say, there will be key questions and bits of data that we'll have to pull together. Where was the keel? Where was the anchor? Talk about the stability of this vessel, the location of it, where it was moored, and also the weather of on Monday morning. Now, Italian media, as you've been hearing about, they say that prosecutors here in Sicily may well be investigating lines of inquiry related to manslaughter and shipwrecks. Now, we understand here that that is a very standard procedure when it comes to very complicated cases such as this one. They essentially need to start broad before they start ruling things out and narrowing down their possibilities. But we're expected to hear from the public prosecutor later this morning.
Indeed, we will, at about 9 o'clock our time. Thanks very much indeed, Ashna. Let's take a look now at some of the day's other stories. And the Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning for heavy rain for southern and eastern England, with around 15 to 30 millimetres of rain likely to fall. More than 60,000 homes were left without power yesterday as Storm Lillian hit the north of the country. England's men are facing a silent health crisis and are dying nearly 4 years earlier than women. That's the warning in a report from the Local Government Association, who say that men are more likely to die from heart disease, cancer and suicide. The organisation wants leaders to recognise men's health as a national emergency. So Keir Starmer has vowed the UK will back Ukraine today and always as the country marks 33 years of independence from the Soviet Union. The Ministry of Defence says more than 45,000 Ukrainian recruits have received training on British soil since Russia's invasion. Events are being held across the UK to celebrate today's anniversary. More than 500 homes in Aberdeen are to be knocked down and rebuilt after being found to be at risk of collapse. It'll be the UK's largest housing demolition linked to RAAC. The homes were built using RAAC, or reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete. That's a cheap, lightweight material that was used between the 1950s and 1990s to build homes, schools and hospitals. We now know that RAAC has structural deficiencies and only lasts around 30 years, leaving many buildings at risk of collapse. Our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillis has been speaking to those affected.
It's just been complete, utter nightmare. You know, this is actually worse than a death.
This was Fiona and Jimmy's home for 40 years. They were mortgage-free, but last year, everything changed.
Opened the door and I was met with 3 council officials at the door with Dangerous Act notice and telling us that we had 2.5 hours notice to get out of our home that night.
Well, here you see what's in this box, Fiona.
They've been in this homeless accommodation ever since, after concrete at risk of collapse was discovered.
This now, getting to me now, type of thing. It's just wish. It's over.
I have even had to stop my wee cleaning jobs because I can't go out and clean someone else's home when I haven't got a home of my own. You know, I wake up in the morning crying. I wake up during the night thinking about it. It's just on your mind all the time. We seem to be getting nowhere. It's absolutely wrecked our lives.
They're now waiting to see what compensation they will get as they navigate their next steps. More than 100 miles away here in Aberdeen, the problem is replicated on a much larger scale. This is set to become the UK's biggest housing demolition linked to the potentially dangerous concrete. More than 500 of these homes will be flattened and rebuilt as part of a £150 million project. An entire community wiped out.
It's a complete ghost town at the moment. There's properties empty, left, right and centre.
Amy owns her flat here and now faces being financially crippled.
My house is valued at around about £120,000 to £125,000, but the council have said yesterday that they would then be taking off the cost of repair. It's looking like around about £70,000. Takes it right down to 50, 55,000 that I will be getting back, and it'll still leave me with around 50 to 55,000 of a mortgage to pay. So
and no house to show
and
for
no
it.
house. I'll be paying for rubble.
Campaigners claim more than 2,000 homes across the UK could face demolition as they demand wider help.
Without a national fund, councils cannot make the decisions they need to make to provide a fair deal for homeowners now paying for the mistakes of councils and the government from the 1960s.
And it's those mistakes, those decisions, now leaving families across the country in turmoil, facing a dire future. Conor Gillis, Sky News.
The government is facing a backlash from its own MPs over its decision to end winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners. Backbenchers say the move could leave some of the society's most vulnerable cold this winter. Our political correspondent Darren McCaffrey has more.
We are seeing the backlash to the government's decision on the winter fuel allowance continue to rumble on, particularly in the wake of yesterday's announcement around the energy price cap, which is being lifted for the first time since January of last year by £149 from the 1st of October. That has provoked some, even within the Labour Party, to question the government's decision to get rid of the winter fuel allowance for those not on benefits, affecting some 3 million pensioners up and down the country. Rachel Maskell, who's a former Labour shadow minister Manchester, still an MP, said that she was deeply concerned about the move and urged the government to reconsider the decision, saying that the government should be there to protect the most vulnerable people in our society, our pensioners. Now, unsurprisingly, the Conservatives are trying to make some political capital on this as well. They're going to put down a motion in Parliament to challenge the government on this. And the Times today are reporting that some ministers have seen their inbox fill up with constituents who want to see the government reverse this plan. Now, let's be honest about this. Labour have got a stonking majority. I'm not expecting we're going to see a U-turn on any of this. But it is a reminder, I think, of some of the difficult decisions that the Labour government are having to make that are going to annoy certain sections of the population. Now, the government would argue the reason they're having to make these decisions is because of the fiscal state that the Conservative Party left the country, and that, of course, is massively challenged by the Conservatives who want to see the government change on this. It must be said, though, if you look at an opinion poll published after Rachel Reeves's decision on the winter fuel allowance, it found that 47% of voters supported the fuel allowance being mean tested, while 38% did not. But this is a row, I think, that is likely to rumble on, not least of all when Parliament reconvenes at the start of September.
To the US now, where Donald Trump has received the backing of a Kennedy. In a twist in the race for the White House, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the nephew of Democrat President JFK, has suspended his own campaign to endorse Donald Trump. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner reports, and a warning that this report features an image of a dead animal that you may find distressing.
A rock star reception to mark the start of an unlikely union. The nephew of Democrat President JFK and Donald Trump.
For the past 16 months, Bobby has run an extraordinary campaign for President of the United States. I know, because he also went after me a couple of times. I didn't like it.
Running as an independent, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., an outspoken anti-vaxxer, had shown signs of strong support, threatening even to take vital votes away from Trump. But now he's abandoning his own presidential ambitions to stand beside him.
I've made the heart-wrenching decision to suspend my campaign and to support President Trump. This decision is agonizing for me because of the difficulties it causes my wife and my children and my friends.
Kennedy's wife, the actor Cheryl Hines, has made no secret of her aversion to Trump. But her husband's campaign has faltered, donations drying up and polling numbers plummeting. And a bizarre expose in New Yorker magazine about him dumping a dead bear in Central Park. Much of the Kennedy family dynasty is disgusted. In a statement, his siblings wrote, "We want an America filled with hope and bound together by a shared vision of a brighter future. Our brother Bobby's decision to endorse Trump today is a betrayal of the values that our father and our family hold most dear. It is a sad ending to a sad story." Team Trump thinks they've staged a coup by getting Kennedy on board. A role in a future Trump administration could await him. It is the latest twist in this most unpredictable of campaigns. Martha Kellner, Sky News.
Time now for a quick look at today's weather. And we're in for a cool and almost autumnal weekend as the unsettled weather continues with some heavy and blustery downpours to watch out for. Southern parts of Britain will have a cloudy and wet start this morning, while elsewhere it's a mixture of bright spells and scattered showers. Outbreaks of rain, heavy at times, will move eastwards over central and eastern England through the day, lingering over East Anglia and the southeast. It'll be brighter elsewhere, but it's going to have a cool feel. Do stay with us, lots to come here on The Breakfast Show for you, including how are people here in the UK celebrating Ukraine's Independence Day. We'll find out what locals are up to in Kent. Plus, a friendly machine or a weapon of war. We'll tell you why people are worried about China's new robo-dogs. Plus, coming up at 1:45, we'll take a look through the morning papers in our news review.
It is a hormonal condition. A lot of girls have it from the time they're about 12 years old, but you don't know that you've got it until much later. You could find out because you're having a problem having a baby or just not feeling well. For me, I was in my early 20s, not that long ago, and I was in my early 20s and my body, I felt terrible. I was sweating constantly. Honestly, I thought I was going through menopause because all of the symptoms were the same. And I went to doctor after doctor and they said, oh, you're fine. You're fine. I had one doctor look at me and said, I can tell just by looking at you, you're fine. So I didn't take his word for it. And I went and did tons of testing and then found out I had PCOS. And it was such an eye-opening thing to find out all of my weight struggles, the overall feeling of not having energy, just feeling unwell all the time was because of that, not because I was doing something wrong. One of the biggest issues with PCOS is infertility. And if you can find out early, there's a very good chance that you can hopefully fix the problem before it becomes a bigger problem as you age and go through any other hormonal things in your body, as women we do constantly. And that finding out if you're 14 years old and you're saying, I don't understand what's going on. It's like, I'm not eating bad, I'm exercising, but I can't seem to shift this weight. Or why am I drenched in sweat? It's cold outside and I don't feel right. Well, find someone to talk to.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, we've got lots for you, including we're going to tell you how people here in the UK are marking Ukraine's Independence Day.
Yeah, and we'll bring you the sport too as we look ahead to match day 2 in the Premier League.
So much to talk about. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about robot dogs because they're becoming increasingly popular in China. They're kept as pets, they work in factories, they can even help in emergencies. But a recent video released by China's military has caused a bit of a stir because it showed one of these machines armed with a rifle. Now there are concerns that tech dogs could be manipulated for combat, as our Asia correspondent Nicole Johnson reports.
Clunky, but surprisingly coordinated. China's robot dogs can run at speeds of up to 16 miles an hour. They perform tricks, are always obedient, and guaranteed to draw a crowd. The top dog can tackle even more adventurous terrain and be sent on a rescue mission or into a fire. They also bounce back from a beating, ready to go again.
This one is strong enough to take my weight. And it may seem like a gimmicky toy, but it is part of the global race between the United States and China for new technology. Not only robotics, but also artificial intelligence.
Here, China's People's Liberation Army is training with a gun-toting robo-dog, leading combat teams on military exercises. But weaponised robot dogs are not the goal, this company insists. The challenge, though, is how to stop it.
We learned about this video from the internet, just like everyone else. We didn't know anything about it before that. We don't want our robot dogs to do anything that harms people. We're deeply sad about this too.
War aside, in downtown Beijing, this could be the perfect pet. You can take it for a walk, or not. There's no responsibility.
I think at the moment it's for people like me, or tech geeks and programmers and so on. But I think in the future it will be quite common, say in 5 or 10 years. I think humanoid robots, the more advanced version, will definitely enter people's homes, when they are affordable, of course.
This elite engineering, designed to humour and to help us. But in the wrong hands, battlegrounds of the future could buzz with drones and the drumbeat of robots. Nicole Johnston, Sky News, Hangzhou.
I'm absolutely fascinated by these robot dogs. I mean, I know there's this potential dark side that they're clearly worried about, but also they seem to be growing in popularity as pets.
Well,
in China. I mean, I don't know. To me, they don't look like the cosiest, cuddliest creatures.
No, they don't. But if you want one, we will make sure we get you one for Christmas, OK? It's a few months away. I'm sure we can find out.
I think that might freak my cat out. I think that's not a good idea.
Have you got your cat person as well?
Oh, yeah, I got a cat.
There we go.
You got
I've
kittens?
Got 2 kittens, yeah. That's for another show, anyway.
That is for another show. Sport coming up, though.
Yeah, lots coming up in sport. It's actually been, you know, for me, it's been great. Pre-season and start of the Premier League season, I've had the opportunity to speak to 6 of the 20 Premier League managers already. And one I spoke to this week, Fabian Herzler, is in charge of Brighton, just 31 years old, the youngest Premier League manager, permanent appointment in Premier League history. Quite incredible, but an amazing man.
And younger than one of his players?
A lot younger than one of his players who's 38, going on 39, that's James Milner. So that's strange. And you think of that dynamic, it could be a bit awkward. But I guess, you know, when you break it down, look in the workplace, there's often bosses who are younger than others are, and that's just part and parcel of it.
Yeah, I'm older than everyone here. Yeah, you're allowed to disagree, but no, that's fine, carry on. Tell us what's coming up in the sport.
Let's move on quickly. Coming up in the sport, we'll tell you why there was plenty of positivity for the youthful George Russell at the Dutch Grand Prix. Plus, there's action on the way from the Women's Open at St Andrews on a mixed day for top British hope Charlie Hull. And Leeds finally get off the mark in the Championship with victory at Sheffield Wednesday.
welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, we're going to be taking you through the papers in our news review. That's coming up at 2:45 as usual.
Yeah, and I'll have your sport as we build up to Formula One season, which is back underway after a summer break with the Dutch Grand Prix and qualifying coming your way today.
Lots to look forward to there. First, though, let's get you up to date with our top stories here this morning. And Germany's Interior Minister has said that authorities are doing everything they can to catch a suspected knifeman after 3 people were killed and 5 others seriously injured in an attack at a festival. The suspect, who police believe acted alone, is currently on the run. Former BBC presenter Jermaine Jenas has apologised for sending inappropriate messages to women after he was sacked by the broadcaster following complaints about his behaviour. The ex-footballer told the Sun newspaper he'd let his family down. And Italian authorities are expected to reveal further information about their investigation into the Sicily yacht disaster at a press conference later this morning. The country's media are reporting the prosecutors are exploring charges relating to manslaughter and shipwreck. And let's just bring you a bit more news quickly from Germany and those comments by the country's Interior Minister. Nancy Faeser wrote on social media, the brutal attack on the city festival in Zolungen has shocked us deeply. We mourn the people whose lives were snatched from them in such a terrible way. My thoughts are with the families of those killed and those seriously injured. She goes on to say our security authorities are already doing everything they can to catch the perpetrator and are determined to determine the background to the attack. The police have every support from the federal government. So that's the latest from the Interior Minister, as a knifeman is believed to still be on the run there in Zolungen in Germany. We'll be live at the scene in the next half an hour to bring you the very latest on that. In the meantime, let's speak more about Ukraine's Independence Day, something that's being celebrated all around the world, including here in the UK. Well, we can speak now to Margarita Bondarenko, who's a Ukrainian refugee who came to the UK just a couple of months after Russia launched its invasion. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us this morning. First of all, how important is Ukrainian Independence Day to you, and how hard is it for you to be away from your country when marking it?
Hello, Anne. Yes, it's really difficult because it's already the 3rd Independence Day here in the UK. And, you know, each time after each celebration, we prayed so the next one would be back home. And we're still hoping.
Hoping for some opportunity to go back and for the war to be over, I assume. And tell us a little bit about what your experience has been like in the UK, because you came here quite soon after Russia invaded, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I arrived in the UK with my daughter in May 2022. My daughter was 12 at that time. Our sponsors changed their mind, and I had a homeless case here, but thanks God and thanks to my friends here in the UK, they helped me a lot. And when I arrived, you know, when you come to the country without an intention to immigrate, yeah, we even didn't unpack for the first couple of months because we still were waiting to go back home. That was the narrative at that moment, that everything could finish soon, you know. And then I started volunteering a lot, helping Ukrainians here with language barriers. Then I studied and got a certificate. And now I'm a community interpreter. But the hardest thing was for my daughter, of course, because, you know, teenager is not a suitcase that you can take and bring somewhere and say, look, this is your new place. You know, she was struggling seriously. And this is where we met Canterbury for Ukraine, their school for Ukrainians, the youth hub. And it really helped with integrating to the UK and to the community.
Well, yes, and tell us a little bit about that kind of support. Have you felt supported in the community? How welcome have you felt here?
Yes, of course. As I mentioned, I'm really grateful. I'd like to express my gratitude, my deepest gratitude, on behalf of all Ukrainians actually here, for you British people and the government. You provided us and our children with shelter and all the support. And but the community is very important. The sense of belonging, you know. The ability to keep traditions, Ukrainian traditions. Today, during celebration, we will have Ukrainian songs and food. You know, all. This is very important for us.
Yeah, so the celebrations to mark Independence Day are going on in Canterbury, aren't they, today? So we hope you get to enjoy that. And we've seen that the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has put out a message to mark Ukraine's Independence Day today. And he said that he said to Ukrainians that the UK will back them today and always. How important is that to hear a message like that?
It's very supportive, of course. We are very grateful for your unwavering support. Your solidarity on this matter, you know, brings us hope because, you know, Ukraine's fighting now not only for its independence, for its territories. It's fighting for European values, for democracy, and at a very, very high cost.
Well, Margarita Bondarenko, I hope today's celebrations go well and marking Ukraine's independence, and we wish you and your daughter well. Thank you so much for talking to us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, yeah, just a reminder of how many Ukrainians have come here fleeing the war and are now kind of integrating into local communities. And good to see that there's some celebrations to mark Independence Day, as they would have celebrated back at home, happening here as well.
Yeah, when you hear stories that they come in with a suitcase, only expected to be here for maybe weeks.
Not even unpacking.
Or even a couple of months. And then 2 years later, they still find themselves not in a position to be able to go back to their home. It's quite tough. But when you hear that story and how much he's engrossed in the community and helping those others, it fills your heart with a lot of warmth.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now then, tell us what's coming up in the sport, James, because there's so much going on, as usual.
Always is, always is. But the cricket's going on at the moment. England in a good position against Sri Lanka, looks set to potentially win the first test today. Jamie Smith scored 100 yesterday. He's been like a bright spark in this side, brought in a young talent, somebody that England have been watching for many a year, and he's now been given his opportunity and he is flourishing. I mean, he's a real talent, someone that I think will give a bright future to England's cricket. So, yeah, looking forward to that today. Formula One's back, Premier League's in action as well, and plenty more to come. But there's also some action from last night as Leeds United picked up their first win of the Championship season.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Who's going to win the league this year? Jamie?
Man City.
And Gary?
Arsenal.
OK. You said the same last year.
I did.
What makes you convinced, again, that they can pip City to the top spot?
I mean, my reasoning last year was coming off the back of the treble for City, thinking that might have an impact on them at certain points in the season, the demands, the expectation, maybe the injuries, the games they play, but the unbelievable to do what they did. I think they won the last 9 games, didn't they, which is just special. And Arsenal had the most incredible season, so I wasn't a million miles away. They're just getting better.
Points away.
Yeah, they're getting nearer, and I don't know. I feel they'll do it. I feel they'll do it at a certain point. And look, you can never write. He could 100% be right because of what Pep Guardiola does. He wins all the time, but I feel that Arsenal are getting so close and they're so consistent. That this could be the year.
Are you becoming less certain about Manchester City?
No.
I mean, they go to Chelsea yesterday. I mean, whatever we talk about Chelsea, they're still Stamford Bridge. They've still got big name players. Arsenal are obviously one of the top teams in the country. But in the last couple of years, when they've gone for the league, I think I'm right in saying that they've gone out of the domestic cups quite early and haven't got to like a final or a semi-final in Europe. And I think this group of players are good enough to they should be getting to the semis of the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup and attacking all the competitions the way Man City do and Liverpool did in the past under Jurgen Klopp. Because I don't think it's acceptable now for a team this good not to win a trophy this season.
I'm not sure I'm in agreement with that. Do you not see the similarities between the journey that Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool went on, where they felt like they were just getting there and eventually they got them? Do you not feel like there's a little bit of that same sort of...
Yeah, but my point being is, though, Liverpool was still attacking. Liverpool won the Champions League before they won the league.
Look, forget the trophy bit. I'm talking about the league
Yeah,
journey.
I get that, but the point I'm trying to make is City is still going like further in competitions. Arsenal should be doing that, and I think that will take a little bit out of them than maybe what we see in the league.
Could you see, Gary, Arsenal doing something spectacular, like Liverpool did ultimately, getting beyond 90, 95 points even?
Well, so Liverpool, to win the league, Liverpool, in the first 27 games before it stopped for COVID, won 26 and drew 1. That's what it took to stop Man City and Pep Guardiola winning the league. You know, they're the standards.
Arsenal are getting to such a high level now of consistency, defensive stability, the way in which the balance of the team, they look like they've got a great spirit.
Any buts there?
There's always injuries to the, I suppose, key players, but that's the same for City. Always injuries is the one thing I would say. Last season they were pretty stable all the way through, as City were as well.
And I believe there's been a late change this evening.
By who?
Not you.
What's happened?
Do you know something? This is supposed to be a sort of like an unannounced private sort of ballot. You know what I mean? Where does this sort of leak of information come from, Dave?
Well, my producer.
You've gone for Chelsea.
So you've got
a great squad.
Chelsea.
You've absolutely tore the back out of them in the first hour.
No, I did not.
So
I actually said I thought they could have a good season. I'm saying there's some bizarre things that happen.
There's actually quite a lot to deal with in this.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, we're going to be going through the morning's papers with you, once again with the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, and the political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. That's coming up next.
It is a hormonal condition. A lot of girls have it from the time they're about 12 years old, but you don't know that you've got it until much later. You could find out because you're having a problem having a baby or just not feeling well. For me, I was in my early 20s, not that long ago, and I was in my early 20s and my body, I felt terrible. I was sweating constantly. I thought I was going through menopause because all of the symptoms were the same. And I went to doctor after doctor and they said, oh, you're fine. You're fine. I had one doctor look at me and said, I can tell just by looking at you. You're fine. So I didn't take his word for it. And I went and did tons of testing and then found out I had PCOS. And it was such an eye-opening thing to find out all of my weight struggles, the overall feeling of not having energy, just feeling unwell all the time was because of that, not because I was doing something wrong. One of the biggest issues with PCOS is infertility. And if you can find out early, there's a very good chance that you can hopefully fix the problem before it becomes a bigger problem as you age and go through any other hormonal things in your body, as women we do constantly. And that finding out if you're 14 years old and you're saying, I don't understand what's going on. It's like, I'm not eating bad, I'm exercising, but I can't seem to shift this weight. Or why am I drenched in sweat? It's cold outside and I don't feel right. Well, find someone to talk to.
Sky News pollen reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Your Pollen Pal app.
Well, cloud and outbreaks of rain, heavy at times, will move eastwards over England and Wales through Saturday morning, lingering over East Anglia and the southeast. It'll be brighter elsewhere, but feeling cool with widespread showers, some heavy and possibly thundery, and brisk winds in the north. The heavy rain over southeast England could bring a risk of localised flooding, travel disruption, as well as surface water issues. And given the unsettled weather, pollen levels will be low to moderate across the country and mostly from weed pollen and fungal spores.
Sky News pollen reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Your Pollen Pal app.
So time now to have another delve into the morning papers. Here with me this morning are former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, and the political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. So welcome back to both of you.
Morning. Hello.
Now, we said that we were going to talk about Kamala Harris's speech at the Democratic National Convention overnight, Thursday night. It's very early Friday morning. All the papers picking up on it today because it came too late for yesterday's editions. So, Kevin, take us to the double-page spread inside the Times, which covers this.
Yeah, so the consensus, it seems to be that it was the best speech of her life. Obviously, a lot of pressure on her. You know, it's been a remarkable ascent to becoming the Democratic nominee, given that a couple of months ago Joe Biden was still the name on the ticket. It sums it up in the analysis piece here quite well. It says our speechwriters did a decent job, but the material was a bit thin. I think it's a bit like Labour, if you remember, before in the general election, people were saying, well, what are they actually going to do?
What are your policies?
You know, you can't get in just by not being the Tories, and Kamala Harris can't get in just by not being Donald Trump. But there's no doubt that Joe Biden stepping down and Harris becoming the nominee has electrified the race. It's given the Democrats a fighting chance, which I think was probably ebbing away. Trump doesn't seem to know how to handle her. He's not been able to sort of alight on a proper attack line yet. That will probably come, though. But for now, I think the Democrats probably can't believe how well it's going.
Well, yes, and the convention was. I mean, conventions always are kind of filled with sort of positivity, but there really was a sense you got
it was
of
very
momentum
interesting
there.
because it was only a 35-minute speech, which as I was watching it live, because it was like 3:30 in the morning our time.
You get up as early as me.
Oh, well, yeah, but 35 minutes I thought was actually quite good at that time of day for us lot over here, which I think is a third of the length of time that Trump's last speech was. But it was quite hawkish. I mean, she started off, as you know, Anna, she started off talking about her personal life. About, you know, her mum and how she grew up and sort of like the working class background.
People don't really know who she is.
No, exactly. So I actually
even though she's been vice president for nearly 4 years.
She hasn't said anything as vice president. That's the problem I have with her. But anyway, so she started off introducing herself, which I thought was quite useful. But the actual speech, I thought it did mention some policy. It was quite hawkish in a way. You know, she spoke about the subjects that are difficult, like the Israel-Palestine situation. She said that, you know, she was going to, you know, make America a military strength again. So it was very the sort of thing you would expect from the Trump camp about, you know, we are a fighting force. We're going to, you know, we are going to do serious things. And at the meantime, all Trump came back with straight away was that, you know, he just described her by insulting her, by calling her a horrible woman straight away.
I just don't think that goes down well with.
It doesn't. No,
voters,
attack the policies. Don't attack the ball. You know, play the ball, not the person. But I thought it was quite an impressive speech, but it hasn't shifted the polls. There's a little story in the Telegraph.
Yeah, there's a story in the front of the Telegraph talking about the race still being very, very tight. And it's interesting now, Kevin, isn't it? Because obviously she's speaking to all her supporters there in Chicago at the convention, but she has now she's getting to the pointy end of things with the election just in November, debate coming up, possible pressure on her to do one-to-one interviews. I mean, are things going to get tougher after this early momentum, do you think?
And undoubtedly, like I said, I think Trump at the moment is still struggling to come up with a good attack line. I mean, as we were just saying there, this personal attacks I just don't think land very well with the voters that will ultimately decide the election. But yeah, it will get tougher for her the closer we get to election day. She is going to have to do these sit-down interviews, and that will be a proper test. But in a way, it's not that surprising that the polls are still tight. American elections do tend to be tight. They come down to these battleground states because of the nature of the electoral college system, you know. So, it's going to be a real nail-biter.
Absolutely fascinating watching all the twists and turns there in the States.
Yes, very much so.
Let's move on, though, to the front page of The Telegraph now, because their main story is focused on Russia and Ukraine, and they are saying that the Defence Secretary has said that Putin's grip on Russia is shaken.
Yeah, this is interesting, because obviously this is the Kursk incursion, which happened on August the 6th, but this is the first time John Healey, the Defence Secretary, has come out and spoken about it. And he's saying, but it's sowing doubt amongst Russians about how much Putin has actually got a grip on what's going on. And so I think it's probably got a point. And he's saying the intervention comes after Zelensky sent thousands of troops into Russia as part of the surprise ground assault. And it has, Russians are now going, well, hold on a minute. How strong is our grip on this war? Because I think it was a surprise attack. And that, you know, the Ukrainians are still in the Kursk area as well. So they haven't been expelled by Putin. So it's a bit shaky. The Russians now are more thinking, apart from the fact they're annoyed about having all their sons go to war in the first place, because I think when the Ukrainians went into the Kursk region, there were young lads sitting there going, all the commanders have run away, and these were kids, like, literally just roped up and go and fight on the front line. I mean, I was struck by the picture of one lad in a Rolling Stones T-shirt going, I don't know what I'm doing here, all the commanders have run away. But the basic of the story is that, you know, Putin's grip on Russia is not maybe as strong as people perceive.
Perhaps, but, you know, we've been saying this for quite some time now, that the war originally was meant to last for 3 days. They were going to take Kiev in 3 days. In 2.5 years, they're still nowhere near it, and it's still going on. So I would... he has the power of the Russian state at his disposal to launch crackdowns on, as he already done, on social media, etc. So I can understand why John Healey is saying this, but I think we might be getting a little ahead of ourselves to think that Putin's on the brink of being overthrown, for instance.
Take us to the Times next, Kevin, because this headline was saying that Liz Truss was a better Prime Minister than Boris Johnson. So tell us who's saying this.
Yeah, so it's quite counterintuitive, really. I mean, Liz Truss has become a byword, hasn't she, for disastrous premierships, only lasted for 49 days, as we all know. Sir Anthony Selden, who writes biographies of every Prime Minister after they've left office.
Been busy recently.
Oh, yeah. He's managed to get that 49 days and turn it into a book, which in itself I think must be quite an achievement.
Is it a slim volume?
Yeah. So he's written, it's coming out, he's done an interview in the Times in which he basically says that in his opinion, Liz Truss was a better Prime Minister than Boris Johnson, even though obviously he was Prime Minister for much longer. He just said that, you know, she may only have survived for fewer than 50 days, but she had an intellectual drive and an economic policy consistency about her, whereas he says that Johnson had a total lack of integrity and was simply constitutionally unfit to be Prime Minister. I mean, it's a fascinating debate. I think it's safe to say neither of them were very good Prime Ministers.
Well, yeah.
And it's maybe a toss-up of coins to who was worse, but it's not often Liz Truss gets positive headlines these days, so she'll probably be quite happy with that one.
Well, yeah, and be fascinating to see what he says and how, you know, further on that subject.
Yeah, I mean, there is an argument, a coherent intellectual argument behind it as to why he thinks she was better.
She just didn't explain her policies as she should have done, and it wouldn't have been so disastrous.
It's difficult to judge because she was hardly in the door and she was out again.
And people just think of the lettuce now. I'm sorry, I know it's my old paper that did that, but the lettuce stunt.
Yeah.
Liz the lettuce lasted longer than Liz the Prime Minister.
Well, and amazingly, that's Keir Starmer's now 50 days today. It's 50 days since he became Prime Minister, so he has now officially outlasted Liz. But it gives you an idea, actually, because it feels like yesterday that he was elected, and yet...
how short her
was. I wonder what vegetable they'd have done for him.
Well...
Not going there. Not going there.
Move on to the Daily Mail, because this is really interesting. Why do we take so many selfies? And this is something that psychologists have been looking at, apparently. And,
OK.
go on.
Well, why do you take selfies, Anna?
Usually to check if I've got anything in my teeth. And it deletes straight away. All right.
I think that's a... Well, we all take selfies all the time now, apart from Kevin, who said, "Oh, my daughters do, but I don't." But psychologists have come up with a reason, and the rather morbid answer is that we take so many selfies because we fear dying. And there is a correlation, evidently, according to this research, between the amount of selfies you take and your fear, there is a word for it, thanatophobia, an intense fear of dying. So the more you fear death, the more selfies you take. It's almost like a subconscious way of creating your own immortality.
Proving you're here.
Exactly.
There's evidence that I'm here. That, interesting.
You even have to go home and ask your teenager why she takes selfies.
I've got a 14-year-old who is, forever like that.
Prime
so,
selfie
I'll need to ask her. I'm pretty sure she's not going to say because she's frightened of dying.
No.
I hope not at 14.
I don't think... The kicker in this particular story is a survey was done in Israel, where, understandably, people have more of a fear of dying than in many countries at the moment.
We're out of time. More from you now. Thank you. Hello, very good morning. It's 8 o'clock. Coming up on the show today, prosecutors in Sicily are expected to reveal evidence they've gathered for a potential criminal investigation into the sinking of a super yacht that killed 7 people. We'll bring you that press conference live at 9 o'clock this morning.
Plus, former BBC presenter Jermaine Jenas apologises after being sacked by the broadcaster following complaints about workplace conduct.
And we'll bring you the latest as the Women's Open Golf reaches the halfway stage.
It's Saturday, the 24th of August. A manhunt is underway in Germany after 3 people are stabbed to death and several others injured in an attack at a festival.
I'm in the West German city of Solingen, where police say a man stabbed passers-by at random. They're now in a race to find him.
Presenter Jermaine Jenas admits to sending inappropriate messages to female colleagues at the BBC. Italian media reports prosecutors in Sicily are considering manslaughter charges as the final body is recovered from the sunken super yacht.
Local prosecutors are expecting to give us an update on their investigation into Monday's capsizing. Join us live.
Also ahead, forced from their home of 40 years, we hear from those left devastated by the UK's concrete crisis.
I wake up in the morning crying. I wake up during the night thinking about it. It's just on your mind all the time.
Calls for the government to abandon its plans to scrap the winter fuel payments with claims it'll hurt the most vulnerable.
And in sport, England are in control and will hope to wrap up victory on day 4 of the first test against Sri Lanka in Manchester.
Hello, very good morning. Thanks for joining us here on The Breakfast Show. Our top story here today, a manhunt is currently underway in Germany after 3 people were killed and at least 5 others seriously injured in a knife attack at a cultural festival. Police say the suspect appeared to have acted alone and at random, but fled the scene shortly afterwards and remains on the run. Well, Germany's Interior Minister says everything is being done to catch the alleged perpetrator. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins has the latest from Solingen.
It was supposed to be a festival celebrating diversity, but it ended in bloodshed. Just after 9:30 on Friday night, a man with a knife entered the town's central square and began his attack, killing and injuring multiple people before fleeing. Police quickly moved to close down streets as the scale of what happened became clear. The festival was evacuated, event organisers telling people to go home and take cover. The attack happened here in Solingen, a city of 160,000 people, located 25 kilometres east of Düsseldorf. The festival, held to mark its 650th anniversary, ended up being a dark day in its history. We all wanted to celebrate our city anniversary together, and now we have to mourn deaths and injuries, said the mayor in a statement on Facebook. It breaks my heart that there was an attack in our city. I have tears in my eyes when I think of those we lost. Police say the reason for the attack, which caused this pain, is still unclear.
The first witnesses told us the person attacked people with a knife. We have no information about a motivation.
As the people of Solingen grieve, police are urging them to remain calm but vigilant. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News.
And Siobhan joins us live from Solingen. Morning to you, Siobhan. A truly terrible night for the city there. How much more information are the authorities giving about what's happened?
Well, they've told us that there is a large manhunt happening today, but if you have a look behind me, it was actually in this square where part of the festival was taking place, and it was here that this man, we're told, started stabbing people at random. Now, the information coming out from the authorities is limited surrounding who this suspect is, a person who they haven't been able to apprehend at the moment. We know is that it's a man, as I said. They believe that he was acting alone, but at the same time, they are saying that there seemed to be some planning in this attack, because it seems that he deliberately targeted his victims by stabbing them purposefully in the neck. So they are now in groups going around this city, the police looking for him, trying to find out where he's gone. And we have had a statement this morning from Germany's Interior Minister, and she said, "We are deeply shocked by the brutal attack at the city festival in Solingen. We mourn for the people who were torn from their lives in a terrible way." And she goes on to say our security authorities are doing everything they can to catch the perpetrator and establish the background to the attack. The NRW police have every support from the federal government in this endeavour. But this is a crime which will shock people by its very nature, but also has come at a very tense political moment, because in the next week we're going to have state elections, and the far-right party, which is fighting in 3 of those state elections, has actually already started talking about this attack, and some will say that they're trying to use it for political gain. So a very tense moment here as police continue to look for the perpetrator.
Siobhan, thanks very much indeed. And I know you'll bring us any updates on that manhunt, but for the moment, thank you for joining us. Thanks. Now, former BBC presenter Jermaine Jenas has apologised for sending inappropriate messages to women at the corporation. The ex-footballer was sacked by the broadcaster following complaints about workplace conduct. He told the Sun newspaper that while nothing physical happened, he'd let his family, friends and colleagues down. Alice Porter has the story.
I am 100% in the wrong, and I accept full responsibility for that. And it's something that obviously I need to address and look at myself.
It was an emotional confession as the former BBC presenter apologised for sending sexual messages to colleagues.
Firstly, to say sorry to my wife, to my family, to the women involved as well, and what I've put them through.
The married father of 4 admitted to cheating, but said it was not physical.
There is nothing illegal that has happened here. This is consenting adults that messaged each other.
This interview comes after the BBC announced on Thursday they were sacking Jermaine Jenas, following allegations that he sent inappropriate messages to a female colleague. It was a rapid fall from grace. Jermaine Jenas had been a regular face of the BBC's biggest programmes, The One Show and Match of the Day. The former England footballer had been seen as a natural successor to replace Gary Lineker as host of Match of the Day. Jermaine Jenas also presented on Talk Sport and was on air when the BBC's sacking was announced.
I can't really talk about it. As you can probably see, I am not happy about it. But currently, as it stands, I'm going to have to let the lawyers deal with it. You know, there's 2 sides to every story.
But in this interview with The Sun, Jermaine Jenas appeared a more contrite figure, as his professional future hangs in the balance. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Well, Molly Malone is here with me now. And Molly, this story feels like it's moved at quite a pace.
Yeah, it certainly does. It was on Thursday where it was announced that he was being sacked by the BBC as their presenter. He was actually on air with TalkSport at the time as it was announced. And on air, he spoke about not wanting to really talk about it and leaving it to the lawyers, saying there's not much he could have said. 24 hours on, and last night we had this interview from him where he appeared to want to convey 2 messages, really. Firstly, a kind of emotive, deeply ashamed, I'm very sorry, particularly to the women who were involved in sending these inappropriate messages, but also to his family and to his wife. He said he thinks he has a problem, actually. He said he needs help and has a problem of, in his words, self-sabotage when it comes to his relationship, and that actually he's booked in to have therapy. But he also appeared fairly defiant. He wanted to put an end to kind of swirling rumours and said that actually they were consenting adults and that he hadn't done anything illegal. But on the face of it, it does appear that the BBC have acted quite swiftly when it comes to this case. BBC bosses will be all too aware that in recent weeks they've had numerous scandals that they've had to confront. Strictly Come Dancing, one of their most high-profile programmes. There's been allegations of bad behaviour there, and one of their most high-profile former presenters presenters in Hugh Edwards is currently going through the court. So they'll want to at least look like, I should say, obviously they're all very different cases, but they'll want as an institution to be showing that they're responding quickly to this. And it seems, as Jenas said in his interview, that certainly happened, in that he was sacked on Monday, and he said that was just 5 days after the initial HR consultation process. So it seems that it's all happened quite quickly, and the BBC as an institution will definitely want to make it seem that way.
Yeah, Molly, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Now, prosecutors in Italy are this morning expected to reveal the evidence they've gathered in their investigation into the sinking of a yacht off the coast of Sicily. Italian media is reporting that this could include possible manslaughter charges, which Sky News understands to be a standard procedure in such complex cases. Ashna Haridag has the latest now from Porticello in Sicily.
It was just after lunchtime yesterday where the body of that final missing person was pulled out of the shipwreck and brought ashore, bringing that recovery operation to an end. And as you say, attention now turns and focus now turns to how exactly this happened. The key question surrounding this will be how did a yacht this size, 56 metres in length, sink so quickly and capsize? As you've been hearing, the Sicilian local prosecutor, we know, has been gathering evidence, speaking to witnesses, speaking to those 15 survivors who are on board, gathering evidence, we understand, that may potentially feed into some sort of criminal investigation. But, as I say, there will be key questions and bits of data that we'll have to pull together. Where was the keel? Where was the anchor? Talk about the stability of this vessel, the location of it, where it was moored, and also the weather of on Monday morning. Now, Italian media, as you've been hearing about, they say that prosecutors here in Sicily may well be investigating lines of inquiry related to manslaughter and shipwrecks. Now, we understand here that that is a very standard procedure when it comes to very complicated cases such as this one. They essentially need to start broad before they start ruling things out and narrowing down their possibilities. But we're expected to hear from the public prosecutor later this morning.
Let's take a look now at some of the day's other main stories. And the Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning for heavy rain for southern and eastern England, with around 15 to 30 millimetres of rain likely to fall. More than 60,000 homes were left without power yesterday as Storm Lillian hit the north of the country. England's men are facing a silent health crisis and are dying nearly 4 years earlier than women. That's the warning in a report from the Local Government Association, which says that men are more likely to die from heart disease, cancer and suicide. The organisation wants leaders to recognise men's health as a national emergency. So Keir Starmer has vowed the UK will back Ukraine today and always as the country marks 33 years of independence from the Soviet Union. The Ministry of Defence says more than 45,000 Ukrainian recruits have received training on British soil since Russia's invasion. Events are being held across the UK to celebrate today's anniversary. Now, more than 500 homes in Aberdeen are to be knocked down and rebuilt after being found to be at risk of collapse. It'll be the UK's largest housing demolition linked to RAAC. So the homes were built using RAAC, or reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete. It's a cheap, lightweight material that was used between the 1950s and 1990s to build homes, schools and hospitals. But we now know that RAAC has structural deficiencies and only lasts around 30 years, leaving many buildings at risk of collapse. Our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillies has been speaking to those affected.
It's just been complete, utter nightmare. You know, it's actually worse than a death.
This was Fiona and Jimmy's home for 40 years. They were mortgage-free, but last year, everything changed.
Opened the door and I was met with 3 council officials at the door with Dangerous Act notice and telling us that we had 2.5 hours notice to get out of our home that night.
Well, here you see what's in this box, Fiona.
They've been in this homeless accommodation ever since, after concrete at risk of collapse was discovered.
This now, getting to me now type of thing. It's just wish it's over.
I have even had to stop my wee cleaning jobs because I can't go out and clean someone else's home when I haven't got a home of my own. You know, I wake up in the morning crying. I wake up during the night thinking about it. It's just on your mind all the time. We seem to be getting nowhere. It's absolutely wrecked our lives.
They're now waiting to see what compensation they will get as they navigate their next steps.
More than 100 miles away here in Aberdeen, the problem is replicated on a much larger scale. This is set to become the UK's biggest housing demolition linked to the potentially dangerous concrete. More than 500 of these homes will be flattened and rebuilt as part of a £150 million project. An entire community wiped out.
It's a complete ghost town at the moment. There's properties empty, left, right and centre.
Amy owns her flat here and now faces being financially crippled.
My house is valued at around about £120,000 to £125,000, but the council have said yesterday that they would then be taking off the cost of repair. It's looking like around about £70,000. Takes it right down to 50, 55,000 that I will be getting back, and it'll still leave me with around 50 to 55,000 of a mortgage to pay. So
and no house to show
and
for
no
it.
house. I'll be paying for rubble.
Campaigners claim more than 2,000 homes across the UK could face demolition as they demand wider help.
Without a national fund, councils cannot make the decisions they need to make to provide a fair deal for homeowners now paying for the mistakes of councils and the government from the 1960s.
And it's those mistakes, those decisions, now leaving families across the country in turmoil, facing a dire future. Conor Gillis, Sky News.
To the US now, where Donald Trump has received the backing of a Kennedy. In a twist in the race for the White House, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the nephew of the Democrat President JFK, has suspended his own campaign to endorse Donald Trump. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner reports, and a warning, this report features an image of a dead animal that you may find distressing.
A rock star reception to mark the start of an unlikely union. The nephew of Democrat President JFK and Donald Trump.
For the past 16 months, Bobby has run an extraordinary campaign for President of the United States. I know, because he also went after me a couple of times. I didn't like it.
Running as an independent, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., an outspoken anti-vaxxer, had shown signs of strong support, threatening even to take vital votes away from Trump. But now he's abandoning his own presidential ambitions to stand beside him.
I've made the heart-wrenching decision to suspend my campaign and to support President Trump. This decision is agonizing for me because of the difficulties it causes my wife and my children and my friends.
Kennedy's wife, the actor Cheryl Hines, has made no secret of her aversion to Trump. But her husband's campaign has faltered, donations drying up and polling numbers plummeting. And a bizarre expose in New Yorker magazine about him dumping a dead bear in Central Park. Much of the Kennedy family dynasty is disgusted. In a statement, his siblings wrote, "We want an America filled with hope and bound together by a shared vision of a brighter future. Our brother Bobby's decision to endorse Trump today is a betrayal of the values that our father and our family hold most dear. It is a sad ending to a sad story." Team Trump thinks they've staged a coup by getting Kennedy on board. A role in a future Trump administration could await him. It is the latest twist in this most unpredictable of campaigns. Martha Kellner, Sky News.
Do stay with us. We've got lots coming up for you here on The Breakfast Show. We've got all your headlines coming up, including we're going to be taking you through the morning papers in our news review. That's coming up shortly.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get
closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
It is a hormonal condition. A lot of girls have it from the time they're about 12 years old, but you don't know that you've got it until much later. You could find out because you're having a problem having a baby or just not feeling well. For me, I was in my early 20s, not that long ago, and I was in my early 20s and my body, I felt terrible. I was sweating constantly. I thought I was going through menopause because all of the symptoms were the same. And I went to doctor after doctor and they said, oh, you're fine. You're fine. I had one doctor look at me and said, I can tell just by looking at you, you're fine. So I didn't take his word for it. And I went and did tons of testing and then found out I had PCOS. And it was such an eye-opening thing to find out all of my weight struggles, the overall feeling of not having energy, just feeling unwell all the time was because of that, not because I was doing something wrong. One of the biggest issues with PCOS is infertility. And if you can find out early, there's a very good chance that you can hopefully fix the problem before it becomes a bigger problem as you age and go through any other hormonal things in your body, as women we do constantly. And that finding out if you're 14 years old and you're saying, I don't understand what's going on. It's like, I'm not eating bad, I'm exercising, but I can't seem to shift this weight. Or why am I drenched in sweat? It's cold outside and I don't feel right. Well, find someone to talk to.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, we're going to be looking ahead to the Paris Paralympics with Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson. Really looking forward to that.
Yep, looking forward to that starting. Only 5 days to go, so not too long to wait. And we'll also bring you the rest of the sport too, including hearing from Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta ahead of his side's game, a game you can watch live on Sky Sports tonight at Aston Villa.
So all that coming up. First, though, let's turn our attention to the government facing a backlash from its own MPs over its decision to end winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners. Backbenchers say that the move could leave some of society's most vulnerable cold this winter. Well, we can talk now to Rachel Maskell, who's the Labour MP for York Central. Very good morning to you, Rachel Maskell. Thanks so much for talking to us today. You've criticised the scrapping of the universal winter fuel payments for pensioners. Tell us what your concerns are.
Look, Rachel Reeves inherited an economy in crisis. We found that 21.9 billion black hole, and she took decisive action over a weekend to put measures in place to safeguard our country from hikes in interest rates and economic ruin. She did that so well. However, as the summer has gone on, we yesterday had yet another bombshell with the increase in the energy price cap, which will cost the average household £149 more. Many people just do not have that resilience. We're still in that cost of living crisis, and therefore this weekend, I'm urging Rachel Reeves to yet again open those books and find a way of protecting the most vulnerable in our community, our pensioners, to ensure that they're able to access the money necessary to pay their energy bills. We know that people, when they're frail, they can't hold their heat, and therefore they do need to keep the heating on more. Otherwise, their homes are cold and damp, and of course, they're more susceptible to respiratory illness. We don't want people to end up in our NHS, or even worse, not least as 4,950 people died last winter from excess deaths due to cold homes. So it's right that we review decisions made back in July. We must remember we've only been in government 7 weeks, and to put in the right measures to keep older people safe and warm this winter. And that's what I'm calling for.
So what exactly do you want the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, to do? Do you want her to reverse the decision to end universal winter fuel payments, or do you want to increase other financial support? What are you specifically asking her for?
Well, I want Rachel to look at this alongside Ed Miliband, who's meeting with the energy companies next week. I've called for a social tariff. I think it's right that the energy companies make a greater contribution, bearing in mind that they make tens of billions of pounds of profit out of the energy market. But we also need to look at how we protect the most vulnerable in our society. Now, the winter fuel payments, a measure has been put down before Parliament around regulations to be debated in September. However, with that, it's removing the universal principle and therefore targeting it at those on pension credit. We know that 880,000 people who could claim pension credit don't currently, and I really encourage people to check if they are eligible. But there are many people above those thresholds who also struggle to pay their energy bills, and it's targeting support at those people which is most important. If that means continuing with the fuel payments this winter, then we must do that. However, I'm also conscious that there are many people who have got affluents that don't need that payment. So putting in measures to protect those people that need protection is absolutely vital. And I look forward to hearing what the Chancellor's got to say alongside other colleagues to ensure that all pensioners are protected this winter.
Would you be prepared to vote against your government on this issue if it came to it?
Well, we know winter fuel payments isn't the full measure that is needed. We've lost the cost of living payments this year. The Housing Support Fund isn't going to local authorities. That ends in September. We need a package of measures, and that's why I'm asking the government to look at what those measures are. We came into power to protect the vulnerable, and now's the big test on that. And I'm sure that ministers are carefully considering this weekend what can be done to ensure that no one has to struggle this winter.
But if you aren't satisfied with the package that you want them to put together, would you vote against the government?
Well, it's not going to come before the whole House, so I won't have that opportunity because it's been brought in through secondary legislation. But that's why I and many, many, many of my colleagues are urging government to put in measures this weekend to keep confidence amongst those people who are struggling so that they can pay their energy bills this winter.
Do you have a sense of how many of your colleagues on the Labour backbenches feel as you do?
A considerable number of colleagues are incredibly worried. We've all got constituents who are quite vulnerable. We've been left with 2.1 million pensioners in poverty. I mean, what kind of society is that? You just question what's happened over 14 years where we've been left in that situation. So, of course, we're all worried. They're our Labour values to ensure that we protect the most vulnerable. And that's why it's so, so important that this weekend, Rachel Reeves and her colleagues considers what measures can be put in place to protect those people that really need that support.
The government, as you've referenced, blames its economic inheritance, doesn't it? And that's a 20-odd billion black hole that they say that they were handed by the Tories. They would say they have to make tough choices. They are also saying they're making concrete steps to support people going into the winter. They cite the triple lock, keeping energy bills down through the Warm Homes Plan, just as examples. Do you accept any of those arguments from them?
Well, absolutely. Labour have made some very, very difficult choices, cancelling projects and, of course, recognising so many of those projects were unfunded in the first place, those commitments that the Tory government made and had no backing behind it. So, of course, difficult decisions are always what government is about. But we do need to protect the most vulnerable. We hear from the charity sectors that are very close to people who experience fuel poverty, saying measures need now to be put in place for this winter. We know that the UK Health Security Agency says that homes should be kept to 18 degrees Celsius. We're just above that level now. We're heading into winter, so it's urgent that we hear how governments are going to provide that resilience to people who will struggle otherwise.
Well, Rachel Maskell, we really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much for coming on The Breakfast Show to talk to us. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, change of subject. We're going to talk sport. James is here, and you've got so many different sports, I can't even count them all up.
Lots of them, but it's a good weekend for British sport because you've got Charlie Hull going well in the Women's Open at St Andrews. George Russell was fastest in practice yesterday for the Dutch Grand Prix, and England going well in a Test match series against Sri Lanka. So, good weekend, Anna, and lots to come.
And lots of rain in the southeast to be able to settle in and watch them.
Don't depress everybody with the rain. Good if you're a sport fan, you want to watch TV all afternoon. Having said that, the sunny weather is coming, I believe. Anyway, coming up in the sport, we'll tell you why there was plenty of positivity for George Russell at the Dutch Grand Prix. Plus, there's action on the way from the Women's Open at St Andrews on a mixed day for top British hope Charlie Hull. And Leeds finally get off the mark in the Championship with victory at Sheffield Wednesday.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. So much coming up for you. We're going through the papers at 2:45 and our news review, of course.
Yeah, we've also got Baroness Tally Gray-Thompson joining us very shortly to discuss the upcoming Paralympics, which starts in just 5 days' time, Anna.
I'm so excited about that. Still feeling the gap that the Olympics has left. So it's lovely to
It's like a long gap, isn't it, though? It's like
a long gap. Lots to get our teeth into, and really good to be talking to Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson shortly. In the meantime, though, let's fill you in on our top stories here this morning. And Germany's Interior Minister has said authorities are doing everything they can to catch a suspected knifeman after 3 people were killed and 5 others seriously injured in an attack at a festival. The suspect, who police believe acted alone, is currently on the run. Former BBC presenter Jermaine Jenas has apologised for sending inappropriate messages to women after he was sacked by the broadcaster following complaints about his behaviour. The ex-footballer told The Sun newspaper he'd let his family down. And Italian authorities are expected to reveal further information about their investigation into the Sicily yacht disaster at the press conference later this morning. The country's media are reporting that prosecutors are exploring charges relating to manslaughter and shipwreck. So, as James was just saying, there's only 5 days to go until the Paralympics gets underway in Paris. But before they can get started, the famous flame needs to make its way across the Channel. And the good news is that's happening today. And it's happening in the village that's actually considered the birthplace of the Games. So we're going to take you to Stoke Mandeville, that village, and speak to gold medalist Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson. A very good morning to you. So great to have you on the show this morning. And it's a really big day for the Paralympics, isn't it, with the lighting of the Paralympic flame at this special ceremony. And we can talk about that in a moment. But first of all, I want to know just how excited you are about the Games.
Oh, I'm so excited. I mean, the Olympics were incredible. Paris really, embraced the athletes. They put athletes at the heart of the Games. And I think for me, as a Paralympian, that Paralympians were involved in the final stages of the flame lighting just shows how important the Games are to Paris and also to the rest of the world. This is the first time there's going to be serious coverage in the USA, and it's going to take the Games to a whole new level.
I was going to say, Tanni, you were part of Seoul in 1988, looking ahead and looking to what's to come in Paris. I'm sorry to bring that up, but it's amazing still. But how much have the Paralympics changed since then?
So after Seoul, there was one programme about 6 weeks later, about 30 minutes. And with each cycle, there's been a huge step up. Obviously, I think London raised the bar. It was then pretty hard for Rio and Tokyo. But, Paris is, really keen to make their mark. There's still some tickets available, but they've been pushing those really hard. And I think for athletes, what we're seeing with the worldwide coverage, athletes who do well aren't just going to be known in their own country. We're actually going to be starting to get some real global superstars of Paralympic sport.
And am I right in saying that you're the winner of 11 gold medals? I wasn't sure if I'd written it down wrong. It's so many gold medals. It's such an incredible record. And so explain to us, obviously it's got a special meaning to you with that incredible record, but explain to us why the Paralympics is so important and what it means to you.
It's the highest thing you can compete at as a disabled athlete. And, I was inspired by watching the London Marathon when I was 12 years old. A Welsh athlete called Chris Hallam won it. He didn't live that far from me. I was already doing a bit of wheelchair racing, but I could then see the pathway. And, if you want to succeed at sport, if you're a non-disabled athlete, it's the Olympics. If you're a disabled athlete, it's the Paralympics. We're getting pretty close to, equity between the two games. We're not there yet, but I think most people expect that Paris is going to move it on. And, that chance to compete for your country once every 4 years. I was very lucky I did multiple events at Games. Wheelchair racing is quite like cycling. So if you do well at one, you can multi-medal. So that's sort of part of the reason that I won the medals that I did.
I'm not sure if it was just down to that luck. Far too modest, Tanni. Look, out of your 11 golds, there were 16 medals in total. Which was your favourite?
Probably the last one, the 400 metres in Athens, where I pretty much knew I was done and that I never had to do it ever again. I mean, it's an amazing experience being an athlete, but it's also, quite brutal. Competing's the easy bit. It's the training 15 times a week, 50 weeks of the year that's the boring bit. So, I think if I had to pick one, it'd be the 400.
And Tanni, you did mention before we're on the cusp of having global superstars in the Paralympics. Have you got any names that people can look out for in Paris?
Yeah, well, I always hope that I'm not going to be the kiss of death for any athlete that I mention. So, you know, Dave Weir is competing, who's got a rich history in Paralympic sport. Obviously, Sarah Storey, who's our most medalled British Paralympian. But Hunter Woodhall, American athlete, amputee sprinter. He's married to Tara Davis. She won a gold medal in the long jump in the Olympics. In the US, they're kind of the power couple of Olympic and Paralympic sports. So I think that's going to be a really interesting one to watch.
Yeah, David Weir, actually a friend of mine, so big shout out to him. He inspires me every day as well. When I was marathon training, he was sending me inspirational quotes. A great guy. And just one more question from me, Tanny. What about Johnny Peacock? He's become a bit of a UK superstar. Expectations for him going into Paris?
Yeah, I mean, Johnny's a phenomenal athlete. You know, Tokyo was pretty hard for him in terms of the way the men's sprinting had developed. But, you know, he's an absolute favourite in the British team, a great personality. And if anybody can do it on the start line, Johnny can.
Oh, well, it's so brilliant to talk to you this morning, Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, and enjoy that flame lighting ceremony, which always is in the UK, isn't it, for the Paralympics, which I hadn't realised. Greece for the Olympics, and there at Stoke Mandeville in the UK, something we should be really proud of. Anyway, really lovely to chat to you this morning. Enjoy the games, and maybe we can check in on you during it. That would be great. And You've absolutely made James's day mentioning Dave Weir there. So that's one of your picks to look out for as his good friend. Thanks very much indeed. Have a great day.
Thank you.
I mean, she's a superstar.
Yeah. 11 gold
11
medals.
golds, 16 medals in total,
Yeah.
5 Olympic Games from 88 to 2004. It's incredible. Incredible what she's achieved. And she was like it felt like the trailblazer for the sport. She was certainly in front of the media a lot, but she also not only did that so well, she produced when it was needed. And she's inspired so many that have now followed her. And as she said, London, we go back to London.
Yeah.
It was astonishing.
I remember being in the stadium for the athletics of the Paralympics, and it was so inspiring. And and as she says, she hopes that Paris knocks it on still further. So really looking forward to it.
Yeah, not too long to wait. That's coming up on Wednesday. And coming up in the sport, it was a good day for England in the cricket in Manchester as they prepare to potentially win the first test against Sri Lanka. First test out of 3. You've got some more details of that coming up.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Who's going to win the league this year? Jamie?
Man City.
And Gary?
Arsenal.
OK. You said the same last year.
I did.
What makes you convinced, again, that they can pip City to the top spot?
I mean, my reasoning last year was coming off the back of the treble for City, thinking that might have an impact on them at certain points in the season, the demands, the expectation, maybe the injuries, the games they played, but they're unbelievable. To do what they did, I think they won the last 9 games, didn't they, which is just special. And Arsenal had the most incredible season, so I wasn't a million miles away. They're just getting better.
Points away.
Yeah, they're getting nearer. And I don't know, I feel they'll do it. I feel they'll do it at a certain point. And look, you can never write. He could 100% be right because of what Pep Guardiola does. He wins all the time. But I feel that Arsenal are getting so close and they're so consistent that this could be the year.
Are you becoming less certain about Manchester City?
No. I mean, they go to Chelsea yesterday. I mean, whatever we talk about Chelsea, they're still Stamford Bridge. They've still got big name players. Arsenal are obviously one of the top teams in the country. But in the last couple of years, when they've gone for the league, I think I'm right in saying that they've gone out of the domestic cups quite early and haven't got to like a final or a semi-final in Europe. And I think this group of players are good enough to they should be getting to the semis of the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup and attacking all the competitions the way Man City do and Liverpool did in the past under Jurgen Klopp. Because I don't think it's acceptable now for a team this good not to win a trophy this season.
I'm not sure I'm in agreement with that. Do you not see the similarities between the journey that Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool went on, where they felt like they were just getting there and eventually they got them? Do you not feel like there's a little bit of that same sort of...
Yeah, but my point being is, though, Liverpool was still attacking. Liverpool won the Champions League before they won the league.
Look, forget the trophy. trophy bit. I'm talking about the league.
Yeah, I get that, but the point I'm trying to make is City is still going like further in competitions. Arsenal should be doing that, and I think that will take a little bit out of them than maybe what we see in the league.
Could you see, Gary, Arsenal doing something spectacular, like Liverpool did ultimately, getting beyond 90, 95 points even?
Well, so Liverpool, to win the league, Liverpool, in the first 27 games before it stopped for COVID, won 26 and drew 1. That's what it took to stop Man City and Pep Guardiola winning the league. You know, they're the standards.
Arsenal are getting to such a high level now of consistency, defensive stability, the way in which the balance of the team, they look like they've got a great spirit.
Any buts there?
There's always injuries to the, I suppose, key players, but that's the same for City. Always injuries is the one thing I would say. Last season, they were pretty stable all the way through, as City were as well.
And I believe there's been a late change this evening.
By you?
Not you.
What's happened?
Do you know something? This is supposed to be a sort of like an unannounced private sort of ballot, you know what I mean? Where does this sort of leak of information come from, Dave?
Well, my producer.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Coming up here on The Breakfast Show for you, we're going to be taking another look at the morning's newspapers with former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, and the political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. That's next.
It is a hormonal condition. A lot of girls have it from the time they're about 12 years old, but you don't know that you've got it until much later. You could find out because you're having a problem having a baby or just not feeling well. For me, I was in my early 20s, not that long ago, and I was in my early 20s and my body, I felt terrible. I was sweating constantly. I thought I was going through menopause because all of the symptoms were the same. And I went to doctor after doctor and they said, oh, you're fine. You're fine. I had one doctor look at me and said, I can tell just by looking at you, you're fine. So I didn't take his word for it. And I went and did tons of testing and then found out I had PCOS. And it was such an eye-opening thing to find out all of my weight struggles, the overall feeling of not having energy, just feeling unwell all the time was because of that, not because I was doing something wrong. One of the biggest issues with PCOS is infertility. And if you can find out early, there's a very good chance that you can hopefully fix the problem before it becomes a bigger problem as you age and go through any other hormonal things in your body, as women we do constantly. And that finding out if you're 14 years old and you're saying, I don't understand what's going on. It's like, I'm not eating bad, I'm exercising, but I can't seem to shift this weight. Or why am I drenched in sweat? It's cold outside and I don't feel right. Well, find someone to talk to.
Time now for our last chance to go through the papers with former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, and the political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. So welcome back, third time lucky. Not that the others weren't lucky. Anyway,
What is going on?
Should we just, I don't know, let's just get on with it, shall we? And we're going inside the Express, and this terrible story that has made headlines all week, and the sinking of the super yacht off Sicily, and a double-page spread here in the Daily Express, talking about Hannah, the last person to be recovered from that wreck, very sadly.
It is incredible. This is, as you say, Anna, it's a story been going on all week, the horrific sinking. I think it happened on Monday, didn't it? Of this super yacht just off the coast of Sicily, and they have recovered now. It has been confirmed, the last body of Hannah Lynch, who was just 18 years old. She just sat her A-levels and was off to Oxford to study. A remarkable, bright young woman. Obviously, her dad also died in a tragedy, Mike Lynch. And it's just one of those horrible... He should have been such a happy time, and we all know now that he's just been celebrating winning the court case in America that we've done over 10 years. Can't imagine the shadow that put over his daughters as well. He's got an older daughter. All her teenage years doing that. She just passed her A-level, so they were on a family holiday. The wife and mum survived as well, and she was in the same cabin as her husband. And I'm just start thinking how she's feeling now. I mean, it's just an awful tragedy for Hannah and her sister, who also was not on the yacht at the time, but...
Who's paid the most touching tribute to her.
Yes, she has. Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's statement that's come up, and the Daily Mail picks up the story as well, doesn't it, Kevin?
Yeah.
And you know, each individual story is awful.
Oh, it's just awful. But you know, it feels like there's something particularly tragic about a young girl, 18-year-old, she's about to start her career at Oxford. Whole life ahead of her, clearly incredibly bright, had a fantastic future, snatched away. And as you see, yeah, there's a lovely tribute from her sister, Esme, you know, often burst into my bedroom and lay down with me, sometimes beaming with a smile, sometimes cheeky, sometimes for advice. She brought boundless love to me. And you just say, how do you cope with that level of tragedy?
Yeah.
It's just...
It's I mean, you know, it's tragic, but, you know, her and her dad have gone. It's the mum now and the sister. It's like, how do you cope with that huge gaping hole in your life?
And in the meantime, we are getting a news conference in the next, it's due at 9 o'clock this morning from the Prosecutors' office talking about their investigation, so we'll get more details.
Wow, potential manslaughter probe into what happened.
Yes, although apparently that it's standard procedure to start with a very wide investigation. You then narrow it down and rule things out as you go. So we'll wait and see what they have to say on that. Let's move on, though, Kevin, to a story inside the Eye. And this is really interesting, comparing the election in America to the election here. And they are saying Democrats take Labour's cue.
Yeah, I mean, there is always, I think, a fascination. I think it's a bit of a one-way street, really. We're fascinated by American politics in the way that maybe they're less fascinated by British politics. But clearly there are definite parallels, I think, between the situation that the Democrats find themselves in, albeit they are the incumbents. They have the White House at the moment, but obviously a completely new candidate. And they've just had the convention. There were some Labour people over there, including John Ashworth, who was one of the big victims of the night as far as Labour's concerned on the election night. He, surprisingly, I should say, lost his seat. However, he's now the chief executive of a think tank called Labour Together, and he was over there, and he was saying that he's been given advice to Democrats who are very interested in how Labour managed to win their landslide. And the parallels include the fact that the Republicans are attacking Harris over her being, they wanted to pigeonhole her as a former prosecutor, Liberal former prosecutor, the way that the Tories did with Starmer, although that didn't stick. And also they want to make immigration a big dividing line, which again, the Conservatives tried to do here, and Labour managed to defeat that. So he's saying that Democrats are picking Labour's brains right now as to how they won and hoping to replicate it come November. So we'll see whether the Democrats can pull off the trick that Labour
It'd be
did.
interesting come the autumn to see whether the conventions over here become like the political conventions over here become like pom-pom,
having
signs.
Having been to many conferences here, they are nothing like.
I know, I was going to say.
You saw the cool rappers coming on. It's nothing.
I love the way they were
here.
surprised that Beyonce didn't show up. I mean, no one will be surprised if Beyonce didn't show up at any of the conferences.
Unless she was saving, biding her time for the big one in.
I don't know where are
Labour
they
conference.
this year? Where's the Labour conference this year?
They're in Liverpool this year.
Beyonce
comes to
see
Liverpool.
Beyonce. Well, it's possible.
Home of music, some would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's move on, shall we, to the Eye. And we do love to talk about the weather, don't we? Because there's a story here about Storm Lillian, which caused a certain amount of damage yesterday. And there's bad weather. I don't know if it's connected or not. You'll have to tell me. Today in the southeast. I know the north bore the brunt yesterday.
The north got battered, and there's this brilliant footage of people at the Leeds Festival where it's been particularly hit bad by Storm Lillian, of tents flying. And, you know, the Leeds and Reading festivals both taking place. That's where very young teenagers go, isn't it?
Post-GCSE results.
Exactly.
Quite often,
I feel really sorry for them because they've been looking forward to it for months and months, and then it gets, you know, their tent gets blown away.
You'd have thought, who'd have thunk it? The British summer in August, you're going to get this sort of weather. Bank holiday weekend, it never happens. But there's this brilliant footage of these kids sitting there holding on to their tents desperately, and one of the tents flies past, and this chap goes, "You don't see that very often." And there's another lad wandering past going, "Have you seen my tent?" And it's not funny, but it kind of is funny.
I suppose it's a story that they can look back on and laugh about, you know.
Yes, exactly.
And there will be lots of other festivals for them to go to in future. But yeah, it's having been in a long time ago at a festival.
Yes, there's a picture, Kevin, of the flying tent.
I mean, what a nightmare. I went to festivals in Scotland, and the weather wasn't particularly great there, I have to say. But we didn't have to worry about our tent.
Well, the Scottish summer is like literally one Tuesday between 2 and 3, isn't it? On an August afternoon.
Definitely one for the wellies. And let's finish with The Guardian focusing on Jeremy Clarkson opening a new pub. I mean, I don't think this is just the big puff for Jeremy Clarkson's pub, but it certainly has proved to be pretty popular.
Well, there was massive queues yesterday, which you don't see outside pubs very often these days, because he was opening his doors for the first time. I mean, as we know, thousands and thousands of pubs are sadly closing their doors now, so he's trying to buck the trend. I mean, what's quite unusual about this is that it's all British fare, so they don't serve ketchup, because apparently it's impossible to get all the ingredients for ketchup in Britain. The only thing in it that is tonic water, because quinine you can't get here. But other than that, it's all British.
Yeah, I found that horrifying. Gin and tonic, I mean, but, you know, that's imported, so that's fine.
While you get over that shock, we're going to say thank you very much to both of you, and lovely to have your company this morning. Thank you. And don't forget that news conference from prosecutors in Sicily is coming up at the top of the hour into the sinking of the super yacht. So stay with us. Hello, a very good morning. It's 9 o'clock. Coming up on the show today, prosecutors in Sicily are expected to reveal evidence they've gathered for a potential criminal investigation into the sinking of a super yacht that killed 7 people. We'll bring you that news conference live this hour.
And in sports, we'll bring you the latest as the women's golf reaches the halfway stage.
It's Saturday, the 24th of August. Italian media reports prosecutors in Sicily are considering manslaughter charges as the final body is recovered from this sunken super yacht.
Local prosecutors are expecting to give us an update on their investigation into Monday's capsizing. Join us live.
A manhunt is underway in Germany after 3 people are stabbed to death and several others seriously injured in an attack at a festival.
I'm in the West German city of Solingen, where police say a man stabbed passers-by at random. They're now in a race to find him.
Presenter Jermaine Jenas admits to sending inappropriate messages to female colleagues at the BBC. Also ahead, forced from their home of 40 years. We hear from those left devastated by the UK's concrete crisis.
I wake up in the morning crying. I wake up during the night thinking about it. It's just on your mind all the time.
Calls for the government to abandon its plans to scrap the winter fuel payments with claims it'll hurt the most vulnerable.
And in sport, England are in control and will hope to wrap up victory on day 4 of the first test against Sri Lanka in Manchester.
Hello, very good morning. Thanks for joining us here this morning. Our top story, prosecutors in Italy are this morning expected to reveal the evidence they've gathered in their investigation into the sinking of a yacht off the coast of Sicily. Italian media is reporting that this could include possible manslaughter charges, which Sky News understands to be a standard procedure in such complex cases. Well, Ashna Hurinek is there ahead of that news conference. Ashna, you're in the room. I know we can't see you. We can see the people around you. But tell us what we're expecting to hear from prosecutors this morning.
Well, Anna, as you might be able to see on your screens, this is a very busy, I guess it's sort of like a local judicial courthouse, if you like. What you see standing around us is essentially lots of representatives of the organisations that were part of the search and rescue ever since Monday. Lots of people dressed in their uniforms. I can see Coast Guard officials, those search and rescue team members. We're here in the town of Termini Imerese, and we're just outside of Palermo, the capital of Sicily, about 11 miles down the road from Porticello, the village in which, the coastal village where just off it we know that sunken shipwreck remains, or super yacht remains. There are so many key questions that the investigators are asking with regards to how this incident happened, how the super yacht sunk, and as quickly as it did, a vessel of this size, measuring some 56 metres in length, with that infamous sailing mast that we've been hearing so much about this week, measuring some 72 metres. So a press conference is being held today. We're going to be hearing for the first time from the head of the public prosecutor's office, a man called Ambrogio Cartosi. So he has been leading the investigation from the Italian authorities' side. He is likely, as I say, to give a little bit more information about the evidence that they have been gathering ever since their investigation was launched on Monday, as soon as this happened. We know that they have been speaking to survivors on board and been gathering some witness testimony. We understand that they are not ruling anything out at this stage, whilst Italian media are suggesting that the prosecution are investigating lines of inquiry relating to shipwrecks and manslaughter. From our perspective here at Sky News, we understand that is a blanket standard procedure when something like this happens. You've got to start more before you start narrowing things down. But let's take a look at the story so far and what we know of that recovery yesterday when that 6th and final person was found on board. 18-year-old Hannah Lynch with her father, both victims of this tragedy. She had just been about to study English at Oxford, having just received her A-level results. At her former school, flags are flying at half-mast, where her English teacher says she lit up the classroom, combining intellectual ability with warmth and enthusiasm. Those that knew Hannah best are heartbroken. Her older sister, Esme, also grieving for her father, said, "Hannah often burst into my bedroom and lay down with me, sometimes beaming with a smile, sometimes cheeky, sometimes for advice. No matter what, she brought boundless love to me. She was endlessly caring, passionately mad, unintentionally hilarious, and the most amazing, supportive and joyful sister and best friend to me. She is my little angel, my star." Her best friend, Angelica Reed, added, "Hannah lived, loved, cared and thought and felt more deeply than anyone I've ever known. Growing up with her and being best friends has been the greatest privilege of my life." Divers had been searching the vessel since Monday afternoon, using remote-controlled underwater technology. By Wednesday, they had managed to access the 6 cabins on board and located 5 bodies. Hannah was the last they'd been looking for. As a mark of respect, those part of the search formed a guard of honour as the boat approached. The recovery of the final body on board brings this search and rescue operation to a close after 5 days. Attention can now turn to the investigation into how this tragedy happened. 4 investigators are in Porticello conducting an assessment of events. James Wilkes has worked on similar marine.
So, as you can see, people arriving for that news conference there in Sicily, where we are due to hear from prosecutors in this news conference, unveiling their first findings of their investigation into the sinking of the super yacht earlier this week, just on Monday. So it looks like it's about to get underway. Let's listen in.
Tutti i presenti, tutti gli intervenuti a questa conferenza stampa che si è resa necessaria per dare contezza all'opinione pubblica di quanto avvenuto nelle acque di Porticello con l'affondamento del veliero Bayesian e con la morte di 7 passeggeri che erano a bordo dello stesso. È stato necessario convocare una conferenza stampa anche perché
we had to organise
come molti di voi sanno,
press conference because, as many of you know,
silenzio non ho risposto alle domande che
we hadn't responded, in fact, to the questions that had been asked in the past few days. And the reason for that is that obviously it to be known that in Italy, one can't divulge anything until you've got to number 106, the piece of legislation, which in fact doesn't allow the prosecutor to release any statement. Or have a press conference or a presser. I personally consider that this piece of legislation, and I've discussed it in more than one debate, because as far as I'm concerned, I believe that this is my will, and from a technical point of view, it's necessary. I believe that this piece of legislation creates obstacles, notable obstacles to the activity with regard to freedom of information. However, I think that all citizens have got to respect the law, whether it appeals to us or not, and especially with regard to magistrates. So therefore, magistrates have got to respect that legislation, and that's the reason I was not able to respond to the questions that I was asked. However, having received the request to choose one of the 2 ways of communicating, I personally feel that the most democratic way of communicating is to communicate because communicating officially, I don't feel that that really resolves any problem. It's something I see every day. And I believe that that can leave, in fact, the need for more details. But I believe that here at some point, I will hand over to my colleagues. And of course, we will try to answer as well as possible to your questions. It's absolutely clear that, of course, there's another requirement. That means that we have to have certain reservations, which is that of the investigation and the secrecy as far as the investigation. Of course, there are a certain number of aspects upon which we can't currently communicate, because otherwise that could be an obstacle to the inquiry. So obviously, I'm sure that you can all understand this. And the freedom of the press and the right to information, but at the same time, confidentiality in investigations sometimes means that the operation is established, but I hope that you'll be understanding. It's not that we're being nasty, that there's certain pieces of information that we're not divulging. So what the matter that we're interested in at 4:32 in the morning, the Coast Guards were notified that there was a problem at sea, and the Coast Guards sent out a boat, and the yacht that we're talking about had already sunk. And there were some divers who, in fact, were obtained from another ship, which was about 200 meters away from Bainsian. And I think, in fact, somebody called Sir Roberts, he is the owner of that particular ship, and he was able to save most of the people, quite a number of people who were on board. Altogether, there were 22 people between the crew and the tourists, and of these, 7, in fact, died. And the 7 of those that were found in the way that I told you, the first one was found at sea, and he was the cook for the crew, and he was called Thomas Recaldo. He was originally from Antigua, and then 6 passengers, and the identity, of course, we're not going to hide this. That's one of the main aspects why there is an international interest on this particular matter. And there were people who were very well known on an international level in the world of business. And these 6 bodies, we immediately realized that it was impossible to save them, and they were recovered bit by bit. On Wednesday, 21 were recovered. Well, we recovered 4 bodies. In other words, that of the banker, Jonathan Bloomer and his wife, Jonathan William Bloomer and his wife, and that of the lawyer Christopher Morvillo and his wife, and the 4 of them were recovered within the ship, which had sunk at roughly 50 meters depth. And then on the 22nd, we recovered also the body of Michael Lynch. And on the 23rd, in other words, yesterday, we recovered the body of his 18-year-old daughter, Michael's Lynch's daughter, a young girl who really affected everybody. It's a very serious tragedy within the we want to try to, of course, control the damages as much as possible. So we were luckily had the collaboration of the firefighters divers who were so professional and so courageous. They were really exceptional. And these specialized divers and these firefighters really carried out an operation that wasn't easy at all, going down 15 meters, and in a few minutes they were able to carry out an inspection of the place, and then after being able to recover bodies. And as far as the structure is concerned, in fact, our firefighter structure, we'd really like to thank them from the bottom of our heart for their courage. And I'd also like to thank the Coast Guard, who also constantly collaborated every single day on the operations and also supervised the sea, as they always do, and are carrying on with their operation. And there's a program which was given by the Admiral. And as far as this is concerned, we also have to thank them for their professional, the fact they were so professional. And we'd also like to thank the forces of law and order. I don't need to tell you how we feel close to the families that have undergone this loss. And of course, what's even more painful would be, in fact, if the development of the inquiry were to demonstrate that this tragedy, this terrible tragedy, was caused by behaviors that were not perfectly in order with regard to the responsibility that everybody had to have with regard to managing the ship, in particular as far as this case is concerned. I'd like to officially communicate to you that the prosecutor of Termini Maresi has hypothesized that there could be, in fact, a question of homicide. But this is just, in fact, the beginning of the inquiry. Generally, a prosecutor is never satisfied to give this information at this stage, precisely because, in fact, the developments as far as the inquiry are concerned could, in fact, change. We cannot exclude anything at all. But of course, there's been a lot of media interest and international interest with regard to the people who are involved. So, of course, we had to organize this press conference. But at the same time, I believe that it's right for me to anticipate the developments of this inquiry can be very variable. I'll stop now and I'll now hand over to Commander of the firefighters, Dr. Bentivoglio Fiandra, and he can tell you what happened under the sea. And also you can see, and then also potentially will answer some of your questions. Good morning to everybody. Thank you, Prosecutor. Thank you for your words. And thank you for having thanked us, the firefighters. It's obvious that as far as this emergency situation is concerned, the specialists that, in fact, had to work were the divers. The divers, in fact, that's one of the specializations of the firefighters. So 400 divers at a national level And here in Palermo, apart from the divers in Palermo, there were others. There were colleagues from the whole of Italy, from Giulia Veneto, from Campania, Lazio, and altogether there were 20 of them. And these 20 divers, 11 of the divers were highly specialized. They're the ones, they're divers that are able to work in very confined spaces, very restricted spaces, just as was the case in the last few days in Botticello. And at the same time, there were 123 dives made up of teams of 2 people for 4,360 minutes of immersion. So those are very high figures, very relevant figures, because many of them, in fact, involved divers who carried out really intense work. And it's an activity that certainly stressed them enormously. But at the same time, the results that we obtained in 4 days, I believe, don't necessitate any other words or any other praise, because in fact the figures speak for themselves. In fact, under these circumstances, at 50 meters depth, in these very restricted environment of a ship, which was big, 56 meters, and of course had cabins. We weren't able to work with serenity because there was so little visibility as well in those last few days. So you can understand that over 4 days, to have obtained the result we've obtained, well, let's say that that represents how professional these diver colleagues were. And I'm here, myself and my colleague, Kulugatari, who's responsible for national communication. We're available to answer your questions. And of course, before there are your questions, you may want to know where we recovered the bodies of the victims. Well, I can tell you straight away that you know that the ship, and this is information that, in fact, that the ship, in fact, sunk and then was laid onto its right-hand side, right at the bottom of the sea. So therefore, it's quite clear that the people were trying to hide in the cabins on the left-hand side. And we found the first 5 bodies in the first cabin on the left-hand side, and the final body in the third cabin on the left-hand side. So there were 6 cabins, 3 on the left-hand side and 3 on the right-hand side. But essentially, we found them on the highest part of the ship, which, of course, was going towards the surface. With regard to the divers themselves, of course, there was an emergency procedure that was set up, which is something that's envisaged by the command and by the national body. And of course, we had some support divers, specialized support divers in this particular case, and that was something that was absolutely fundamental. So they gave logistical support to the staff, and they helped with mapping, and they helped them from a personal point of view, and they also helped as far as the telecommunications are concerned, and many other things. And the staff, technical staff, responsible for certain logistics, planning of the emergency contact. And there was personnel involved in communication. And on a daily basis, there were 70 people who had different responsibility. And all of them were supporting the main activity, which was that of the divers. And the provincial commander from Palermo, it's a command that represents the activity at 360 degrees. And of course, they're relevant, and they were supported by the colleagues in other command areas. And that characterizes the fact that we're working on national level. So, in fact, each commander, for example, that heads up the Department of Firefighters, has got the same procedures, has got the same means, the same equipment, so as to ensure that when they help one another, they're speaking from the same language and they were singing from the same song sheet. And that really helps us enormously. So I finished now, but I'm available now to answer your questions. So I'll now hand over to Admiral Macaglia from Palermo, and he will illustrate or explain not only what the Coast Guard did in the past few days, but he'll also talk about something that's very important, in other words, the future. And I believe that we've all perfectly understood that the serious development of the inquiry is absolutely depending on recovering the wreck. If we don't recover the wreck, and if we can't examine it in detail, then it will be difficult for us to be able to see the various responsibilities upon. So good morning to everyone. I would also like to thank everyone that the prosecutor thanked, especially, and I'd like to do this in the name of all the other administrations. In the last few days, we carried out an extraordinary operation. Everybody worked in an amazing way. And this is a very sad moment because, after all, there are 7 human lives that have been lost. And I also like to record you that the words that we've held to thank the Coast Guard and also the firefighters and all the divers that in very little time were able to recover the bodies. Having said this, as I had already said, as the prosecutor already said, summarized, we received a first signal towards 3:38 in the morning of the 19th, and sorry, 4:38, corrected himself, and we'd had a sign. We had a red light, and as soon as we'd had that signal, we, and I'm talking about the Coast Guard of Porticello, we also warned the others. And in this particular case, realizing that we were talking about a ship which was in difficulty and which had actually sunk, we in fact made sure that we had the normal emergency operations, and we sent all the means available, and we decided also to plan the rest. So therefore, immediately we sent 2 ships from the Coast Guard, and another one from Palermo, and another one from Imerese. And there were also some firefighters with some divers on board. And at the same time, we had contact with a member of the crew who was telling us that there were 12 people who were at sea. So generally, they were in the water, or they were in fact on the side of the ship, on a safe ship that could save them. But we realized that we had to get to the ship, and then we could see that there had been a shipwreck, and then we had to make sure that the emergency services, in fact, our groups, there were 15 of them altogether, and we immediately began research. And at that moment, of course, we had absolutely no idea whether the 7 people missing were at sea or were, as sadly was discovered, had remained in the actual ship. So from then on, and now we're talking about very few minutes, we were able to upgrade, we were able to organize research. Because after all, we had to be able to find 7 people. We were searching for the 7 people we were hoping they were alive. And we used planes from the firefighters, from the Coast Guards, and they were helicopters or planes that carried on patrolling until, sadly, the tragic epilogue on the same day at 9:45. In fact, the firefighters already recovered the cook, who was in fact close to the ship. And then also, as prosecutors just said, yesterday and the 2 days before the others, final person yesterday. And we carried on also either researching or searching the water, and also we were using, in fact, of course, helicopters, and we were working with the firefighters and also the Coast Guard. And so everyone was collaborating with regard to the inquiry, and they were using, of course, the possibility to also send images that they'd obtained. And having said that, this operation, this disappearance, which of course is not normal, and it was such a serious event and such a tragic event, and we're talking about a ship that sank, and then we began, and this of course could be concerning for the local community. We also started carrying out a monitoring operation, and the environmental agency took some samples in order to make sure that there was no toxicity, that there were no toxic results. And up until now, and I believe that there's something that was also necessary to make sure that, and apart from that, we also activated the monitoring between the MSA, which is the European Agency for Maritime Safety. And yesterday, we also used some air means which carried out an atmospheric examine the atmosphere, but in fact there were no hydrocarbons that had been given off. Of course, this monitoring will carry on, and will carry on in the next few days. And yesterday, they also took samples of water. Water samples were taken. So that's the environmental aspect. Because, of course, in that kind of zone, because of these beautiful coasts, we have to really take care of them. And, of course, Porticello lives from fishing, not only for the local community, but also the province. And fishing activity is very important. And there are many ships, many fish. Having said that, we want to be able to recover the wreck, of course, in coordination with the prosecutor, because at the same time, of course, there will be the inquiries, and they have shown the will to recover the wreck. We've already, in fact, had contact with the prosecutor, And of course, according to the national norms, we want to make sure that we update all the necessary measures in order to make sure we can check any kind of toxicity. And we're well aware that contact is being made as well with private companies in order to be able to monitor the situation, who are ready to intervene if there were to be any kind of hydrocarbons at sea. But in any way, what's particularly relevant, in fact, that there is availability and the technical means to be able to recover the ship, and it's something, in fact, that started being done almost straight away. And I'd also like to say that, of course, the environmental aspects were taken into consideration, and everything that needed to be done was done. And they were totally available. So I now will stop, and it's up to you to ask questions. I'd just like to warn you, but I believe that I don't need to, that of course there won't be any other statements from us in other circumstances. As in the next few months, if we would consider it to be necessary, we will use, in fact, the instruments that the law gives us. But it's no point trying to contact us for any extraordinary statements, because there won't be any. So now I'd like to ask you to ask the questions, to introduce yourselves, and tell us which body you represent. You do need to use the microphone so that everybody can hear you. Thank you, Terranova Kronos. Prosecutor, I'd like to ask you, as the crew, in fact, apart from the cook, totally survived this tragedy, have you asked yourself, of course, you do have a professional secret, but how come the crew, in fact, left behind the passengers? Because after all, normally, before leaving a ship, the commander is supposed to save all the passengers that are on the ship. I just wanted to understand whether you can answer that question. I will ask Dr. Camerano, who is carrying out the inquiry, to give you the answer. Good morning to everyone. Well, yes, obviously the inquiry is concentrating on this particular aspect as well. And I can already say that we are obviously going to discover how much they knew, or to what extent all the people were warned who were present, all the guests, of course. And of course, the question is understandable. And this event that took place was completely unexpected. So the inquiry, which, as the prosecutor previously said, the inquiry is going to be based, first of all, on recovery of the wreck. And then, of course, when we'll be able to examine the wreck, we'll be able to possibly get some answers to questions that at the moment cannot be answered because there are aspects that we don't know. Thank you. I'll hand over the microphone to you. Francesco Patanero, Repubblica. 2 questions. So the black box of this ship records everything. Was it discovered? And second question, we talked, in fact, of openings, which, in fact, there were parts of the ship that were opened. The divers saw those. So, in fact, is it possible that there was a problem with regard to stability because it was leaning to the right, as we've already noted? Can you just remind me of the first question? Oh, the black box. Oh, yes, the black box. Right. And it was rebuilt in 2020. Yes. Well, to answer this question, I will, in fact, the head of the firefighters, we're not sure that a black box was present, but to find a black box, you've got to look within the wreck. So you've got to carry out, of course, and it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous for the divers. So in this initial stage of the inquiry, the divers concentrated exclusively on the search for was searching for people who were still alive, and then later on looking for bodies. So we can't answer with certainty. We'll only be able to answer when we'll be able to recover the wreck. And as far as the open aspects, well, there we're talking about piece of information we can't reveal because we're talking about information which has got to be confirmed when we examine the wreck. So we just can't give you those details. So, in fact, with regard to all the technical characteristics and what the divers found, we can't tell you. We can't give you that information for the moment. So, but this is objective data, isn't it? Well, yes, but we're talking about aspects that we cannot reveal. Because there's going to be an inquiry, and also because it could be information that in fact won't necessarily be confirmed in the future analysis. So to give you that information now, in fact, could be wrong. The information would be wrong. So with two reasons, we will not be able to tell you anything with regard to the state of the ship. Raffaele, wasn't there a third question? What about the autopsy? No, nothing has been done yet. It's something that will be done.
Bethany Bell, BBC News. Quale è la timeline dall'indagine?
What is the timeline for the inquiry? I'll hand over to the Admiral. Of course, we don't know the specific timeline, because after all, the wreck is 50 meters down, and we know that it's the whole thing depends on the availability of the owners, the managing company, and it will depend how quickly the plan will be established. First of all, there'll be a technical plan, which has got to be submitted to the maritime authorities, and then we'll see, and then a very general, detailed plan. So, presentation of this plan in parallel with the inquiry that the prosecutor is carrying out, we could potentially, of course, authorize the operations. But this is only a preliminary stage. It's only a preliminary stage. I can't say, oh, in 8 weeks we're going to be able to do it. There has to be a recovery plan. And another aspect that I'd like to mention, the preliminary stage that we asked for and will impose will be that to make sure that, in fact, the ship is made safe. Of course, We want to do debunking, and then after that we'll be able to carry on. But at that kind of depth, there are specialized companies that can, when they submit a plan, that they in fact can empty it. They empty, of course, empty the remaining fuel as well. So our priority is to really check on the aspects from an environmental point of view, make sure that we're protecting, in fact, the sea. And then after that, we'll carry on with more detail. Marcella Vi, tutti Rai Uno. I've heard that you talked about the fact that this took place in very few minutes. It's difficult to understand. Some people have talked about a quarter of an hour, and the size, in fact, of the ship means that it must have, in fact, taken longer. How is it possible that a ship of this kind, that must have had airbags, 500, that in fact sunk so quickly in so few minutes? It's really almost not believable. So this, of course, affects one of the main aspects of the inquiry. So we're going to look into that in more detail for sure. And we also have to think about the various stages of this event. So there's no point, in fact, think about, in fact, it going down so quickly. We've got to take into consideration various stages that could, or that we'll have to look at in more detail. We'll have to look at all the behaviors of the crew, and we'll also have to look at the meteorological situation at the time. In other words, what the weather was doing at the time. And those are all aspects we have to look at. Delino, prosecutor, you said that it will be essential to recover the wreck. So do we have to wait 2 or 3 months? Or will will there be information given along the way? I'd like to know the 2 other ships, were they in correct position? Or was the ship, in fact, correctly placed? And the whirlwind wasn't, in fact, as strong as it had been, in fact, envisaged. So was, in fact, the ship placed properly? I'll answer the first question. With regard to the first question, when and if we will get to the stage from one stage to another, it won't depend on, in fact, on getting the ship. I mean, some known information, unknown information. So, for example, a magistrate or a prosecutor of the Republic, because they're the ones who are going to decide when they're going to acquire information which, in fact, comes from various details. They will have to look and reflect about this information, but a minimum amount of time will have to be taken before adopting any kind of decision of this kind. So therefore, my answer very quickly is that it could happen that we will, in fact, have some information with regard to the wreck. So as far as examinations, I mean, the people, in fact, are shocked. So what we first of all got to do, because they were very badly wounded, we've got to help these people from a psychological point of view and also from a physical point of view. So there are many doubts. We want to get rid of doubts. The first point I'd like to make is that it's a pleasure yacht. And as Sarah Roberts said, there aren't any where they're talking about there's no real information as far as that it was wrongly placed. It was able to stay there. And what we were able to see on the maps was that there was just a slight deviation of anchorage because there's a piece of archaeology nearby. But I'd just like to add another aspect. This kind of on mercantile ships, there are also some anchorage points, and you can see that on maps. And in fact, from 2018, there are details from the commander of Porticello who establishes precisely where anchoring should take, and also says if there were to be some bad weather conditions, that they can go to another ship. So there we're talking about mercantile ships. But we're talking about mercantile ships. So those kind of ships, of course, have got the obligation to communicate and have got to give us a lot of data, who's on board, where they're going, and also give information from a safety point of view and environmental point of view. So to your answer, to your question, sorry, I'd like to say, this yacht, the yacht we're talking about, or Sarah Roberts, was able to be there. It was able to anchor there. And then, of course, there are certain evaluations from the commander who'll decide what he'll do, that, in fact, there could have been potentially an extreme event that that affected the wreck. But in the middle of the sea, we could read about this drama in the middle of the sea on that night from 00 on the 19th to 12 o'clock the next day in that particular zone. And we're talking about a large area. We're not excluding local phenomena. In northwest, there was 5, and the visibility was good. And as far as the weather is concerned, apart from extreme events, which are being, in fact, verified by the prosecutor, and at the same time, you'll be able to find this information. There was a great deal of visibility. There's another question. May I ask you another question? Question is inaudible. As far as eventual extreme events, as the conditions were the ones they were, of course, there were no elements apart from everything that was done, and there was done, the commander to, in fact, taken certain initiatives. I won't go into that because the commander, what the commander did. Of course, you've got all the information, that information. But there are, of course, some ships that have got some equipment that are able to monitor the meteorological conditions. May I ask a question? How is it possible that the captain of a ship such as that is not being examined psychologically? I mean, there was a party. I mean, of course, 7 people have died. And if there are twin ships, I heard that there were two ships of almost identical ships as well. That didn't take place because, in fact, the emergency was declared to all the members of the crew, who were not only under shock, but who also had wounds. So at that point, when we didn't really understand at all what had happened, so we really concentrated in hospital to try to look after these people from a physical point of view. And then afterwards, we were going to, in fact, examine the passengers. We wanted to be able to reconstruct the event and also the whole of the ship, and also to see what had happened the previous day. There's no obligation at all. Question inaudible. But as far as the second question is concerned, we know that there are some ships, not necessarily twin ships, but ships that had very similar characteristics. But that's all the information we have. But there are some ships that have the technical characteristics that aren't necessarily twin ships, but have got similar characteristics. You've got to introduce yourself and say who you represent and use the microphone. I've got the microphone because I took it earlier on. May I ask a question? Yes, madam. Fasano from Corriere della Sera. I'd like to understand the following thing. So, of course, we'll have to see, in fact, details in the future, but the crew that you listened to, the crew says that did something happen on the ship? Or was the crew not quick enough to carry out certain maneuvers? I don't know. Of course, I don't know the technical aspects. So that's my first question. The second question is, on that night, was there a guard on board? And did you find the tender that hadn't been found? And the fact that you haven't found it, has that got to do with the opening of the portals? Because we heard there was a problem with one of the portals. So 3 technical questions. What was your first question? Can you just remind me? What was your first question? Your first question was? Oh, yes. As far as that question is concerned, the statements made from the crew are fundamental as far as the inquiry is concerned. So basically, we can't divulge what they said, and it would be very prejudicial as far as the inquiry is concerned. But it was also necessary to get statements from them in order to be able to understand as much as we could with regard to the facts themselves. As far as the tender is concerned, no, I'll go back to the previous statement. In fact, we're talking about aspects that relate to the analysis of the boat and also what was found from the very little information that we were able to obtain when there were interventions by specialized people But basically, their aim of... we can't reveal those details. And what was your third question again?
Sì, sì, sì.
Inaudible. There was a member of the team that was controlling. Question without microphone. On the tender, yes, I did answer. The captain and the crew, will they remain in Sicily? Are they going to have to stay here?
It is 10 o'clock. You're watching Sky News. We are listening to a press conference live from Sicily on the sinking of the super yacht. Let's listen in.
To the Italian authorities, especially the prosecutor of the Republic, because it will be necessary to ask some other questions. And all the members of the crew, we need to... It's possible that we'll need to hear them again in the future. Tom Kington from The Times. I would like to know, can you confirm that this inquiry cannot be concluded before the wreck has been obtained? Yes, of course, says the prosecutor. And the crew, or the passengers, left the ship the night before, didn't they? From the statements that we've got, the ship stopped the previous day, in other words, the day before the wreck at Cefalù, and some of the passengers left, and then after that went on board again at Cefalù. At Cefalù, not Porticello, that's right. Hello, Sky News, English television. What is the status of the... to what extent did the staff and the captain collaborate? They really collaborated. Very, yes. And the divers?
The divers that went under, how traumatizing, distressing has that experience been for them?
Questo ovviamente faccio rispondere il comandante dei Vigili del Fuoco.
I'll get the commander to answer.
Allora, a questa domanda io non rispondo perché...
Well, can't answer because I'm not the one who, in fact, went under. I think it's a question you should ask the people who physically were there. So after the press conference, we've got the national coordinator for the divers, so you can actually speak to him. I mean, if you want, we could immediately hear him. Giuseppe, you want to speak, and then maybe Nardelli or Di Buro could say something. Hello to everybody. I'm responsible for the divers at national level. Well, the situation we found ourselves in was a situation which wasn't conventional, and it's something that's already been done. In fact, the ship had sunk more than 50 meters down, and of course, we had very difficult characteristics to deal with. So the divers working in this atmosphere had to be particularly careful because of the depth and also not to stay down there too long. And they had to make sure they had all the equipment at hand, and they had problems as far as having access and exit, and the operations, of course, had to be carried out by being very careful from a security point of view to make sure that the staff could recover the people and not place them at further risk. And the operation was really difficult because of what I've just said. And we carried them out very slowly, because even if you just moved a few meters, it took a long time, at times that were not compatible with the depth. The operations had to be taken on with enormous security. And according to our methods, which are very systematic, we were able to find all the people that had dispersed, and we were able to find everybody. Am I mistaken, or did I understand that this event was unexpected or unusual? And you said, was it wise for them to be positioned there, for the ship to be positioned there? And there was somebody that in that set who was supposed to set off the alarm. Why didn't that person set off the alarm? I'd just like to know why they hadn't set off the alarm. Well, there was a response, in fact, to the first and the second question. Well, in other words, I'll allow the Admiral to answer that question. Well, I've already said that there was no reason not for them not to be there. And according to the forecast in that area, the weather forecast, we're talking about the west part. But really, it's up to the captain of the ship to decide. So, for example, if the captain of the ship goes from Chevalu to another place, we're talking about a pleasure yacht here, and so it's a private yacht, and even if just to rest, they just wanted to stay in that particular area and then carry on, those are estimations the commander has made. I mean, maybe he wanted the guests to rest and then carry on. So, from a technical point of view and opportunity point of view, we are talking about a private yacht, and the commander, of course, decides what to do during the ship. Inaudible question. Was there... Of course, we need to find out exactly what happened. That's something that's absolutely essential. You, in fact, have said that the positioning of the 7 bodies was in the first cabin on the left. So, in fact, that gives the impression that there were some passengers that tried to run away and to save themselves. So, why were those passengers the last? So how come the crew had actually saved themselves? And also you said that the ship owners will be involved in recovering the yacht itself. So that means, of course, they'll be responsible for all the costs. I'll get the Admiral to answer that particular question. As far as the first question, I don't know about the behavior of the people who died. It's possible that where they were, they tried to run away, but we cannot, in fact, confirm that during this initial stage of the inquiry. Because the bodies could have simply been there because the water had sort of sent them there. So therefore, we can't demonstrate the whole thing. Your second question: why did the passengers stay behind? Well, possibly because they weren't awake, but the others were. And do you have any statements from the divers. Was no one actually warned? Were they not warned? Well, I can only partially respond, and that's exactly what we're trying to find out amongst the various statements and comparing them and seeing what emerges. So that's certainly something that will be part of the inquiry. And third question, as far as recovery, of course, it's the owners that are responsible for that. They're the ones, as I said earlier on, in fact, will have a recovery plan, and the owners. In fact, the recovery will be, in fact, the responsibility of the owners. I don't have an estimate as far as the cost. No. And I'm unable to tell you it's going to cost X rather than Y. I can't tell you that.
Una domanda soltanto. Fabio Geraci del Giornale di Sicilia, buongiorno. Una richiesta, siccome si parla...
I'd like to make a request talking about who was able to save themselves and who stayed behind. Those who, of course, were able to save themselves were awake. But those who remained behind, did they remain behind? Did they remain behind because there was a lot of water coming into the yacht? So, are you able to tell us what actually happened? I think I can answer by saying we still are unable to give you an answer as far as that question is concerned. We've got to go into further depths with regard to the inquiry itself. New York Times, I'd like to ask on questions about the weather and the information that we got. Was there a meteorologic special, in fact, event? From the information that we got, probably there was a downburst. Thank you. Financial Times. I wanted to ask you, when you talked earlier on about tracing hydrocarbons in the water, could that give us any kind of indication with regard to the state of the engine? And could that be... was the engine on rather than turned off? And the tracker shows that there were a number of minutes when, in fact, the ship was sinking. So should they have, in fact, given an alarm and told the coastal guards, or is that something that's not envisaged normally? So your first point, if I record it, hydrocarbons. No, whether the engine's turned on or off, that's got nothing to do with, in fact, the pollution. Well, the fact that there isn't any hydrocarbon, that means that we can consider that possibly the engines were not on, but there's no link between an engine being turned on or off. But if the engine would have been turned on, there would have been hydrocarbons. No, there's nothing. There's no link like that. So this downburst. No, there was a second question. The trackers. What about the trackers? It's normal, as happened, that when there is a danger, imminent danger, or you are trackers, red trackers, and they were seen, and they alerted the authorities, the Coast Guard, who then intervened after that. Yes, but the fact that, for example, the commander could have potentially had maneuvered in order to potentially, quite rightly, avoid the sinking. it obviously wasn't possible to do so. But we don't have details. We're not able to reconstruct what happened. And so there's details of the inquiry. I can just tell you when, in fact, we saw the first notification. As far as this downburst,
Questo è proprio uno degli oggetti dell'indagine. Mi è stato
well,
chiesto se fosse
we're looking at
probabile che
this in the inquiry. We're wondering whether it was an atmospheric event that caused the problem, and if so, to see the intensity of it. But of course, that's a really important element. You must have an opinion. Is it probable or is it likely that an extraordinary event, meteorological such as this one, could in fact cause a problem? We prefer not to look at probability. We want, as far as possible, get to certainty, or at least to see, find the reason. But surely that's part of the inquiry. Yes, of course it is. No microphone. Sorry.
Adesso mi sentite? Come
Can you hear me now?
sono inavvicinabili, hanno anche rifiutato il sostegno di psicologi. È vero che la moglie
How come
Lynch ha chiesto di non
Mike
parlare
Lynch
con gli organi di stampa o è una suggestione?
didn't want to talk to the press, and how come people would not? We didn't know that. It's not our responsibility to decide upon the behavior of these people.
Eccomi, scusate.
Quale testata, dottor Arena?
Stampa e Giornale di Sicilia. Volevo chiedere,
I'd like to ask,
che la nave è andata giù di
at the
poppa.
beginning,
I costruttori dicono che la nave è sostanzialmente inaffondabile.
the people who built the ship said that it couldn't in fact sink.
Prima domanda.
So,
Avete trovato
second question,
passeggeri morti, i primi 5 in una stessa cabina?
the dead passengers were found in cabin. So were they all sleeping in the same cabin?
Poi, riguardo
And
al recupero,
with regard to recovery,
di
the
chi
cost,
recupera, ma anche quello che trovano è di loro oppure devono consegnare alle autorità italiane per gli accertamenti, computer, telefonini?
who will in fact carry out the
disponibilità dei
examination with regard to recovery?
a rimanere qui. Questo vorrebbe dire che se
And
non fossero disponibili, una questione di gentilezza, e volessero andare via e magari andare a fare un'altra crociera con un
if,
altro equipaggio.
in fact, the people that were there say they wanted to go on another cruise with another crew with other people, would they be able to just do so?
Rispondo solo a quest'ultima domanda.
I'm just going to answer the last question.
In Italia non c'è una legge
In Italy, there isn't any legislation that allows the legal authorities to keep somebody unless they've been arrested to stay. So we don't have any instruments to keep them. And thank goodness, in a way, actually, because otherwise we'd be living in a state which would not be particularly free. I mean, of course, we're hoping that there'll be as much collaboration as possible. If there isn't collaboration, then possibly we would have to have recourse to other instruments, for example, to have a rogatory commission or something else. So the first question was with relation to the ship itself. So we're talking the statement made by the person who was working for Perini, who in fact are the manufacturers of the ship. Well, we just have to find out precisely what happened, where the water came in, if there was sufficient water that came in to ensure the wreck. But we'd like to confirm that, in fact, it went down and so not everyone wasn't in the same cabin. No, they were in a cabin which wasn't one of the cabins where they were staying. But we're not sure. We're not 100% sure because, in fact, there could be another possibility. So, as far as the motives, I can't tell you. And as far as the equipment that was found, well, of course, that equipment will be sequestered and will be examined. So just one question, just to be clear. The commander, should he not be accused? Because after all, this ship, in fact, went down in a very short time, and the crew on board, where there was one that was specialist of with regard to the weather, but how come these 7 people, in fact, how come the commander just left and left those people behind? So, are you likely to talk about behavior that should have taken place? I imagine we're talking about the chain of decision-making during that quarter of an hour. And also, it's quite normal that should take place. Well, I'd like to say something, and then I'll hand over to Amirano. On the basis of a recent reform, the prosecutor has to, in the register of those accused, has got to only mention a crime if there are certain elements that would, in fact, are likely to have taken place. So here we're not simply talking about looking at the roles that certain people had, but we're looking at, in fact, individuals or people who would potentially be culpable, negligence, lack of prudence, lack of responsibility. But we've got to be able to see what profiles, in fact, existed. So therefore, I'd like to answer by saying that there are a multitude of possibilities. So, for example, there could be certain responsibilities as far as the command is concerned. There could be certain responsibilities as far as the whole of the crew. There could also be some responsibilities as far as the manufacturers or people who built the ship. And there could have been also some people who were not surveying or supervising the ship. So all these aspects at the moment we are looking at. If there were, in fact, a kind of crime, we'll have to see. We or I, as a prosecutor of the Republic, I've got to see whether it's likely the substance of the crimes, and to see whether really there was homicide, and to see whether one has to impose a certain responsibility on the basis on somebody. But of course, that all requires reflection. We have to think about it. We can't just deal with this quickly. Maybe I didn't explain myself properly. I think it's likely there could have been, in fact, some crimes or manslaughter, but it's a question of who it will be responsible. We'll only be able to establish that if you give us the time to look at it, because after all, in the media, you work very quickly, but we, as a prosecutor of the public, who is not able to, in fact, just simply, use intuition, we have to think about things. So, of course, it's my responsibility. And so we have to look at what happened with my colleague Camerano and carry out the carry out the evaluations. I'd just like to add something. Because first of all, when I talked about the fact there was one person that had to check the conditions and to see whether the weather conditions were getting worse. But there was one person who was responsible for that, not two people. The Admiral said that it was normal, that there was a certain procedure as far as this. I'd like to know what's the process in the case of a ship drowning. What is the process? Well, in this kind of situation, when there's a shipwreck, most of the time when you check on an event which is so extreme, which is that of a wreck, we in fact have all kinds of ways of researching, and we activate them. And that's what we did that night. At the moment, in fact, we realized that first of all, there'd been an embarkation and that then there was a shipwreck. What we want to do, of course, is save human lives at sea, because we carried on with the research on the surface, and also there were a number of helicopters that all the other administrations of the state participated in up until 1:30 yesterday, when we put an end to the operations, because we were still hoping to be able to find somebody alive. So therefore, there's some very normal procedures. And it's normal if the engine stopped, then I will send an emergency ship. And this often happens, in fact, in the summer. But in an event of this kind, which is so serious and so enormous, of course, we made sure that we used all the operations, and we responded, realizing it was an emergency, and we sent many groups. We sent 5 groups, and then we added some more, because of course we had to be able to research. And if they're refugees, we do the same thing. I can give you some examples. In coordination with the prosecutor of Agrigento, for example, I am the maritime director for East Sicily and also responsible for the 12th Center for Saving and work on Lampedusa and Pantelleria, because there are many migrations there. And so, in fact, there had been a yacht, if there'd been, in fact, or if there'd been a ship with some migrants, we, as an emergency teams, would have done the same thing, and we've already done that in Lampedusa. And we, in fact, recovered some bodies at 60 meters to be able to send them back to the families. And I'm telling you this, and there was also if it had been some fishermen, or if it had been migrants, we'd have done the same thing. We'd done exactly the same thing to check that there were people that we could save, and then we'd have coordinated the activities. And we would have recovered some bodies, but sadly, often that wasn't the case. We were able to recover people alive. So the emergency service work in the same way for everybody. We don't, in fact, differentiate between nationality or colour. We're there to save human lives and nothing else.
Financial Times con le ultime domande, scusate. Allora,
Last question, Financial
per
Times.
quanto riguarda il razzo, sappiamo che è partito alle 4:38 e che la barca è
We
affondata alle
know
4:06. Anche pensando
that
che questi
the
minuti
ship
siano
sank at
serviti per raddurare il pistone
4:06.
sulla scialuppa perché magari c'era qualcuno in mare,
So were
non
certain
trovate che
people
30
able to
minuti sia
be
un lasso di tempo, 32
saved
minuti
at that
sia un
time?
lasso
But
di tempo
32
piuttosto
minutes
lungo per
is
aspettare
quite a long
cominciare
time,
il
isn't
volo.
it?
In secondo luogo, avete confermato che la barca è
And
andata
you
a
also
più bomba e
confirmed
mi
that the
chiedevo cosa vi ha portato a
ship's
fare una
hull
conferma.
went down. So how could you
Infine,
confirm that? And
volevo farvi una domanda sul comportamento di Caulfield al momento del vostro arrivo.
I wanted
So
to
che
ask
si è unito
on
immediatamente alle
Caulfield's
ricerche, mi
response.
domandavo se da un punto di vista investigativo questo avrà un peso su una, diciamo, analisi
Well,
caratteriale.
Allora, sulle prime domande in realtà
on the first questions,
sembra di aver già risposto, cioè nel senso è proprio il cuore
I've already answered your first questions.
dalle attività che stiamo svolgendo, cioè
The activity that we're carrying out, in other words, to listen to people and analyze in a detailed fashion all the data. All the data was transmitted on satellites, and also that really is at the heart of activity. So
tutta la nostra attività sarà volta a fornire
basically, our whole activity is to establish certainty as far as behaviors are concerned. What happened, where it happened, why it happened, with regard to the
di soggetti che hanno ovviamente
thinking the hull. Of course, there are some subjects who
sono coinvolti nel naufragio
were involved in the shipwreck, with regard to the stern, rather. And Commander L'Alta saw, in fact, it drowning, and also seeing the positioning of the wreck, which is completely compatible with that version. But of course, we'll only be able to ensure certainty once the wreck has been recovered. With regard to your third question on the behavior of the commander, he was collaborating
non ha un peso ai fini dell'indagine, ovviamente è un comportamento apprezzato,
and
certo,
his behavior
riguarda i fatti, non il comportamento successivo dei soggetti.
was okay.
Se ho capito bene, prima mi pare di avere capito che il dottor
First of all, I thought I'd understood
avesse detto che
that
uno dei punti di indagine sollecitato da una domanda è anche il fatto che l'equipaggio sia salito sulla scialuppa,
the fact that
sulla
the crew
zattera di salvataggio e gli altri
left.
fossero lì. Ora, siccome ci sono quei minuti che
Second question,
registrati dal
there are some minutes that were recorded.
ci sono questi minuti dal momento in cui la
There are
barca
those
si vede
moments
che è all'ancoraggio,
from when
che si muove
you can see
in un punto e poi si stacca,
that the ship was above and then suddenly down. So weren't there a few minutes to scream to people, or wasn't there a signal that could have been made?
se mi può rispondere è hanno provato a dare l'allarme
And did they try to give off an alarm and then these people didn't wake up, or did the alarm not work, or
ci hanno provato perché c'era il panico ed era troppo
was everybody so panicked that they just didn't know what to do? Look, I can't answer.
No, ovviamente, infatti volevo precisare una cosa, sicuramente
Well, I'd just like to specify one thing.
non potrei rispondere analiticamente alla domanda.
I mean, we can't respond in detail because to your questions, but
con cui ciò è avvenuto, perché dalle prime dichiarazioni comunque
from the first
che la nave
statement,
sia abissata in maniera improvvisa, mi spiego meglio, che fosse una
the
condizione di normalità e poi in 3
because after all the situation wasn't normal.
è un periodo in cui le condizioni
This was a situation where the conditions had worsened exponentially, and it's important also to understand the weather, to understand the initial situation and what happened later on. We're going to have to look at this not only from the point of view of the satellites, but also we're going to have to examine the wreck, because after all, it's very important to analyze and look at the command area. I can't answer reasonably. I can't answer with reasonable certainty at the moment. And there were some statements that were made, but I can't confirm them. Have you carried out autopsies of victims? No, not yet. Not yet, but we will carry out the autopsies. And a follow-up question with regard to downburst. Downburst, something that happens quite often locally. So the fact it was a downburst rather than whirlwind, do you know that? No, in reality, from a technical point of view, whether it's a downburst or whirlwind, I was just responding to a question that was, of course, that's something that would be fundamental to understand the intensity, the size, and the typology. In this first stage, conditions are compatible. So we're at initial stage at the moment, and then eventually we'll have to see more details. But for the moment, the fact that there was a whirlwind, well, it's just hypothesis. It's just hypothesis. But the satellites photograph quite a large area, and as a downbursting lasts a few seconds, it's difficult for it to be, in fact, recorded specifically. So we'll just have to analyze a series of data with regard to what happened. And we believe that it could be compatible, but to know.
Una rapida domanda dal Times di Londra. Oggi, in questo momento,
So today, at this moment, the captain is free to go, or is he still,
deve rimanere per più domande da
or must he stay? You're going to ask him a few more questions. Probably we will ask him some more questions. And
l'esito di questo accertamento. Prego.
Velocissimo, scusi, ma gli avvisi
Very
di
quick
garanzia
question.
sono preliminari allo svolgimento delle autopsie, che sono atti ripetibili?
Se riteniamo di emettere gli avvisi di garanzia, certamente saranno preliminari.
Ok, la ringrazio.
Se non ci sono altre domande...
So if there are no more questions, I would like to thank you.
No.
Answer no to an inaudible question.
Dottoressa...
Scusi, aggiungo soltanto una cosa alla domanda del collega.
I'd just like to add one thing. The autopsy, of course, envisages a number of preliminary stages. So we first of all have to satisfy all those preliminary stages, and then we'll be able to carry out the autopsy. But at the moment, we're only at the initial stage. No microphone.
Credo sia la dottoressa Squizzato. Rai, TG2.
Ovviamente l'indagine è tutta italiana, ma
Of course, the inquiry is Italian, but as there's been contacts with English authorities and American authorities, how are you going to proceed? Well, the inquiry is Italian. That the inquiry will just be Italian, I can't confirm that. Because, in fact, if the crime has been committed by an Italian citizen abroad. I don't know, in fact, what the situation is in the UK or the US, whether they have to be repatriated, I don't know. But possibly there will be also things underway from the foreign judicial authorities. And of course, there's a whole series of activities, a whole series of contacts. And there will be developments, but this isn't the moment to talk about them.
No, non è detto. La dottoressa Terranova è negativa, è pessimista. Può darsi che
It's possible that going forward with the inquiry, we will
degli accertamenti, dei risultati per i quali
add some results where it potentially could be necessary to have a new press conference. But sadly, all I can tell you that any other statements in other formats won't take place. Another question? Images of the research underwater.
Insomma, il segreto investigativo esiste. Ci sono altre domande? Se non ci sono,
Any other questions?
tutti quanti.
So thanks to each and every one of you. Work well and goodbye.
Prosecutors in Italy saying they have opened a manslaughter investigation over the sinking of that super yacht off the coast of Italy, in which 7 people have been killed. He stressed that this is, of course, just the beginning of the inquiry, repeatedly reminding us that they are in the preliminary stages. An official from the fire rescue service said that it was clear people were trying to hide in cabins on the left-hand side, and the ship landed on the right-hand side after it sank. They said if the wreck isn't recovered, it'll be difficult to fully investigate the sinking. And a reminder of the grand scale of this operation over the last 5 days. 70 people, they said, involved in the search turned recovery operation. And of course, teams still providing ongoing and continued to support to those affected. The 15 people, remarkably, that survived and were rescued from the waters off the coast of Sicily. A reminder that prosecutors in Italy have opened a manslaughter investigation over the sinking of the super yacht. They are yet to conduct any post-mortem examinations. We're going to come back to that story now, because we have some breaking news for you here on Sky News on another big story we covered this week for you. And detectives investigating a house fire in which 4 people were killed in Bradford have made further arrests. A reminder that a woman, a 29-year-old woman, and 3 children died in that fire. Bryony Gowith was 29. Her 3 children, Dennisty, Oscar and Aubrey, they were 9, 5 and 22 months old, all died after their home was, what investigators say, deliberately set alight in the early hours of Wednesday morning. Devastating for her family and, of course, the community there. Well, detectives have made further arrests. The statement says that a number of warrants were executed in the Keighley area in relation to a murder investigation on Westbury Road on Wednesday, the 21st of August. 2 men aged 36 and 45 have been arrested on suspicion of murder and remain in police custody. It says that there are still ongoing investigations and searches at a number of addresses. A 39-year-old man who was arrested at the scene on Wednesday on suspicion of murder remains in hospital in a critical condition. So we'll keep you up to date on that. That picture there on your screen of Bryony Gowith, 29, and her 3 children, Dennisty, Oscar and Aubrey. OK, let's take you back to Sicily and Porticello, where prosecutors have launched a manslaughter investigation. Sky's Ashna Harinag has been following this story for us since that super yacht sank in the early hours of Monday. And Ashna must remind our viewers that these are the preliminary stages, a lot more to go, but a significant development today.
A significant development, the first time that the world's media have been hearing from those who have been investigating this shipwreck after it sunk on Monday, this giant super yacht, as it has been described to people in the local area. The prosecutor confirming that they are not ruling anything out, including investigating shipwreck and manslaughter charges, although, as you say, it is in the very preliminary stages of this investigation. Taking centre stage just now in the past few minutes, speaking for about an hour and a half, was the head of the Public Prosecution's Office, Ambro Cartosio, who had representatives, he is flanked by representatives on the left by the Fire and Rescue Service, on his right the Coast Guard Service. They started by explaining the exact turn of events, how the shipwreck and the subsequent calls unfolded. They started by telling the world's press that that call came at about 4:32 on Monday morning, by which time they say the yacht had already been submerged and had sunk. A nearby vessel, had begun rescuing those on board. They managed to rescue some 15 people. 7 people ultimately died in this tragedy. The body of the chef was discovered almost immediately, we heard. The 4 other bodies were found then on Wednesday. They were Jonathan Bloomer, his wife Judy, and Chris Morvillo, a friend of the family, and his wife Nada. The body of Mr. Lynch was then found on Wednesday evening, and yesterday the prosecutor told the press that they found Hannah Lynch, the 18-year-old daughter of Mike Lynch. They said the discovery of her yesterday affected everybody, given that she was a very young girl. He thanked the rescue teams involved. He described them as being so professional, so courageous. He said they showed exceptional strength. The courthouse that we're in the courthouse some 11 miles away from Porticello. This is the local authority where they are investigating what happened, the turn of events. Some 100 journalists were in this room, dozens of cameras, as I say, people from right across the world have been brought here to cover this incident. The prosecutor, Mr. Cartosio, said he was looking into shipwreck and manslaughter culpability and looking at whether that could be ruled out or not, but he is not excluding other options. The Fire and Rescue Service team member that he was joined by also spoke about the diving operation that day. He said that they had 20 divers involved. 11 of them had that highly specialised skill set, who were able to work in these confined and restricted spaces. He said that those divers completed 123 dives, and they were made up of teams of 2, and they dived in total for 4,470 minutes in total in a desperate attempt to try and find those 6 originally missing people. He said that there was little visibility over the 4 days. He also gave some descriptions of where the bodies were located on the vessel that is currently lying on the seabed 50 metres below the surface of the water. He said that all of those bodies had been found on the upper part of the yacht. He said it was possible that they had tried to run away once the boat had started to tilt, but that he said it was truly impossible to know. But he did say it was likely they were sleeping, and we knew that the divers were specifically trying to reach the cabins of this vessel. He said perhaps that is why they failed to escape. He said the vessel itself was lying on its side, something that we had heard on the scene itself. He said that the first bodies were located in the first cabin on the left-hand side. He described the vessel to us, the 6 cabins. There are 3 cabins on the left-hand side, 3 on the right. He said the first bodies were found in the first cabin on the left-hand side, and the very last body they discovered yesterday, that of the 18-year-old Miss Lynch, was discovered in the 3rd cabin on the left-hand side. He said, too, that the ship sank via its stern. The Coast Guard also spoke a little bit about how the European Agency for Maritime Safety has been alerted as part of their investigation. And what he spoke about was that they had concentrated on trying to reach the people rather than trying to reach any form of investigative aiding work, such as the black box for this yacht.
Ashna Harinag, live from that press conference in Sicily. Thanks very much indeed. You are watching Sky News Today with me, Simon Mawson. There's a lot to absorb from that press conference. Ashna's just given us the details. After the break, I'll be speaking to maritime investigator James Wills. Stay tuned.
It is a hormonal condition. A lot of girls have it from the time they're about 12 years old, but you don't know that you've got it until much later. You could find out because you're having a problem having a baby or just not feeling well. For me, I was in my early 20s, not that long ago, and I was in my early 20s and my body, I felt terrible. I was sweating constantly. Honestly, I thought I was going through menopause because all of the symptoms were the same. And I went to doctor after doctor and they said, oh, you're fine. You're fine. I had one doctor look at me and said, I can tell just by looking at you. You're fine. So I didn't take his word for it. And I went and did tons of testing and then found out I had PCOS. And it was such an eye-opening thing to find out all of my weight struggles, the overall feeling of not having energy, just feeling unwell all the time was because of that, not because I was doing something wrong. One of the biggest issues with PCOS is infertility. And if you can find out early, there's a very good chance that you can hopefully fix the problem before it becomes a bigger problem as you age and go through any other hormonal things in your body, as women we do constantly. And that finding out if you're 14 years old and you're saying, I don't understand what's going on. It's like, I'm not eating bad, I'm exercising, but I can't seem to shift this weight. Or why am I drenched in sweat? It's cold outside and I don't feel right. Well, find someone to talk to.